What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. I'm your host today, Spencer. Chris was supposed to join us, but he's likely thousands of feet in the air right now as he had to work late and is apparently just testing airplanes. I'm joined by Dan and Tim from the Kingkiller podcast to talk about some theories for the Kingkiller Chronicles. We touched on some of these in our Kingkiller episodes, which you can check out in the annotations above, but wanted to dedicate a whole episode to unraveling some of the most talked about mysteries from this beloved series with the guys who have dedicated a whole podcast to figuring this kind of stuff out. I'll introduce our guest properly in just a moment, but first, if you enjoy this content, please ravage those like and subscribe buttons down below and hit the little bell icon to get notified when we put up new content. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy to keep up with all our other terrible opinions and meanderings, as well as catching the occasional picture of my dog, Hank. With all that out of the way, let's introduce our guests and answer the age-old question of what have we been reading lately? So you guys run the Kingkiller podcast, which is, I believe, is your main topic. I know you do some Stormlight stuff as well. But do you want to tell us who you guys are, about your podcast, how it got started, etc.?
Yeah, I'm Dan, and Tim's my co-host. We had another one of our buddies, Fitz. He's on all the way through the Name of the Wind episodes and into the Wise Man's Fears. But we all we grew up with each other, known each other since little kids, so known each other for decades. And we started a podcast specifically to cover the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. We wanted to do a deeper dive than we were finding online, and so we went and we really dive into the books. Like, we go through chapters and we spend hours upon hours dissecting the books and going through the theories. But yeah, it's just mainly, it gives us an excuse to shoot the crap with each other and kind of go through the books. But yeah, we've covered those, and we've covered a little bit of Stormlight Archives. We put that on hold for a little bit until we get through the rest of the Kingkiller Chronicles. And then we kind of just occasionally we'll do some videos on talking about like House of the Dragons, Rings of Power, that kind of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, each of your episodes is like sometimes like 2 chapters or like a certain amount of pages, right?
Yeah, we have episodes where we cover 1 chapter and it takes us like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Like, so but it's because of his books. Like,
yeah,
there's so much there's so many hidden layers upon layers with everything he says. Like, he doesn't really have a lot of empty words. Like, he's doing something with everything he says. And so many of the theories, it requires you to kind of put one piece from this chapter, find another piece in another chapter, and kind of pull them together. It's one of those books where if you go through each book once, it's an amazing story, right? And you'll be entertained. When you go through it a second time, you'll notice there's a lot of Easter eggs that he hid in there. There's a lot of things that he layered out. Then you start going through it even deeper, and then you realize, holy crap, man, this guy layered so much into these, so many hidden theories that, I mean, you can spend years going through these books and finding new stuff. I still find new stuff, and I've read the books so many times I don't even know how many times I've read them now.
That was actually like one of the reasons why it was an easy sell to me to be able to do literally a podcast about just the series, mainly because, I mean, just rereading a book, you see, oh, this is how he did that. This is how he led into these things, the foreshadowing, things like that. But with Rothfuss, I mean, the payoff reading it's on another level. Like, it really is on another level, just in terms of his craftsmanship. But then also, it's not just the Easter eggs. It's like, on a first read, there's certain things, there's no reason you would look deeper into certain things.
Yeah.
Second read, third read, even again, still, I mean, just on the last podcast episode we read something where it's like, how did I not see that before? You know?
Yeah.
So it's amazing. And that's why I'm part of the camp where I'm like, in a way, I'm patiently waiting, man, because once that third book comes out, yes, finally we get this and we get to sink our teeth into it and get to go forward with it. But all the anticipation's done, you know, it kind of closes that chapter, closes that door on a lot of things that we pontificate about, that we have questions about, that we get to extrapolate about, that ends to a degree, right? Once the third book comes out. But
right.
yeah, so I mean, I love it. The funny thing is I never was really a big fantasy guy. It took Dan a while to convince me to read it. But once I did, I'm recommending it to virtually everybody I know. I don't care. I didn't really care what they read. Any of my musician friends, I'm telling them got to read it, and just virtually everybody while I was first reading it. So yeah, it was exciting. You know, it still is. I mean, it's still fun. Every time I read Hem's Hotfoot, it's so enjoyable. It just never loses anything.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal, man.
Yeah, every single time. And yeah, this book really is for everyone. Like pretty much everybody that I've ever seen pick it up for the first time has always come back to me and been like, wow, I cannot believe how good this is. And yeah, you guys picked a perfect book to do a whole podcast on, because there's even things like, I mean, I've read both books probably 6 or 7 times, and I'll still go on to Reddit, and there's people who are like, if you translate this word like from Latin or whatever, like it means this and this is how it connects. It's just like, how is it this interconnected? How is it this deep? How is there still this much mystery? And it's really just a never ending gold mine of theories and new answers.
It's kind of funny too, because in a way I almost wish every author would take that much care, but then we'd have so much less books.
Oh yeah.
So I kind of don't at the same time, but there's not a lot of Rothfuses out there, man.
Yeah.
You know, I think I personally think in terms of what he was able to accomplish, it's up there with like the Tolstoys of the world. It's up there with the Tolkiens. I mean, it's phenomenal in terms of what he was able to accomplish, and I love it. Yeah, it's great.
So
I say that too much. Someone complained online that I say it's great too much.
So Dan got you into the book, but Dan, how did you get into Kingkiller? When did you first pick it up?
Well, I made the mistake. I read all of A Song of Ice and Fire in 2011. Like I watched like the first episode of Game of Thrones, and then I was like, I got to read these. I got hooked on the show immediately, and I was like, I got to read these books. So then I read all the books immediately, and then after I finished that, I went and looked for another series. And so I was like, looked up like a popular fantasy series, Name of the Wind came up. So I was like, all right, I'll just check it out and see what it is. And I read that and I was like, man, this is phenomenal. And then went through, like, I think I finished the first book, like as the second book came out. And so I was able to just jump straight into the second book without a wait. And so both of their last books came out in 2011. So I read the latest book for both of those series in 2011. I was like, man, I cannot wait until I jump into the next one. Can't wait for the next book. And so, and then, still waiting. But
man,
I can still, if they never came out with another book, I could still get enjoyment going through and rereading those two series.
For sure.
The disappointment would be is if they put out the next book and it's not good. I would rather not get another book and be able to enjoy what they've already put out than to get one that is unsatisfying ending or something like that. I don't want that. I'd rather leave it open-ended before you crush my dreams. So if they feel it's not good enough yet, don't put it out until it is, because I don't need a bad book.
Right, for sure. So you've actually been one of the fans who has waited the full 10 or 11 years, whatever it's been.
I read Wise Man's Fear. Like I bought it and then I was finished with it the next day. So I've been like, when people talk about like they've been waiting for however long, it's like I've been waiting since the day after it came out. So there's no, unless you read it all in the first day or you got an advanced copy, you've not been waiting longer than me. So if I can make it, you can make it.
That's so
well, it doesn't matter if they can or not. I mean,
yeah.
The choice the matter. it's kind of an interesting, almost like a philosophical question. The way I've finally looked at it after so much time of all the like vitriol that's out there, I had never come across it until one of the people I recommend the book to. The first thing he hit me with was, dude, what the fuck? Why'd you recommend this? It's not done yet. I was like, what do you mean it's not done? He's like, the next book isn't out. I was like, oh, like it didn't occur to me to be upset about it. Like it just didn't occur to me. And I guess, no, that's just a difference in how people are as individuals. Some people need completion. I guess I'm into edging. No, but no, really, I mean, I think in a way it kind of gets, I mean, why not enjoy it? If you have a choice, you have a choice in the matter of how you can react to it. And I agree with Dan. I would rather it be open-ended. There's a lot of books I enjoy the most. They kind of don't have an ending. And that's what a lot of people complain about online is like, well, it doesn't end. I'm like, well, of course it does. There's a last page. That's the end.
That's the end.
And a lot of times, dude, that's open to interpretation. That's a lot of like great Russian literature. There can be great shows, great pieces of literature that don't hit you over the head with the theme. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to like punctuate it perfectly. Like make your own connections. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on the fence a little bit with that because I do like a fully completed story where you can have it at the end of the day and know that it's completely encapsulated. But there's also lots of things that I've really enjoyed that are left a bit more open-ended. Like Night Angel, I was telling you guys before the show, the ending to that, like it has an ending, but there is a lot more of like, well, what would happen next? And it does leave it open for you to kind of imagine like where these characters go after the big battle where the evil is defeated or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I do like that. And shows like Dark, I don't know if you guys have seen Dark, but that was left pretty open-ended and left the viewer to kind of theorize like, what was that all about? And so I do like things like that, but I also I feel like I might be a little upset if Kingkiller was left too open-ended, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the third book comes out, I'm going to read it the day it comes out.
Sure. So, yeah, of course.
It's not even a question, but it's not so much like I don't want a third book is I don't want a bad one. So if he thinks, and then it's just like, if he doesn't think it's good enough to put out, then don't put it out, like because I trust his judgment after what I've seen. If he'd put out some bombs, and then I might have more questions, because then I'd be like, well, look, man, you made me wait 7 years for a piece of garbage.
Yeah,
like you don't get to like ask for my patience anymore after that. Like you're judged based on if for your wait time. If the book you put out, I think it's really good, then the wait was justified. If you put out a bomb, though, you're not going to get any more grace from me after that. Yeah.
So my problem with Rothfuss isn't that like I would agree. Like I would rather have a very good book than a very shitty book. My problem with Rothfuss, and I've talked about this a million times on the podcast, so I'll keep it short, but he's doing all this other stuff besides writing the book. And I'm like, just write the book. That's all we want. Just write the thing. It's like, I'm a firm believer in vote with your wallet. And it's like, dude, I'm not going to pay for you to Twitch stream. You know what I mean? As cool as some of those might be, that's not what I'm interested in the book. I don't care about your Twitch stream.
No, I don't either. I don't pay for any of his other stuff. If he puts out a book, I'll buy it. But I don't like watching him on Twitch or whatever. That's not my thing. But especially like he's like playing Minecraft, that just seems boring. But I don't care if that's what they do, because I mean I'm not working 24/7. Like if you put me on camera and you were like, what are you doing all day? Like I piss off a lot of time. Like, so I mean, you have to, like, especially, I mean, your mind, you would go insane if you're just a nonstop focused on one thing, and you're not the Name of the Wind took him like 19 years to put together.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know what the process, like I could never create the Name of the Wind. I could never create something.
I have that type of
So
patience.
I don't
That's
even
true.
I don't even, it's hard to comprehend the mind of someone who could put that together. So I don't even know what it would take. And
Right.
so
That's
if
true.
that's his process, I have no idea. Like maybe if he sat down in front of a computer and just put in 12-hour days and someone like put a gun to his head and made him do it, he might come up with something completely different that is not good. So I don't know. I don't know what the process would take. And the same thing with like artists. You see artists that can put up paintings in a day, and then you find, other people, they spend 20 years on one project. So sometimes it's different strokes.
It's a very good point.
I'm kind of in that camp as well of trusting the process, especially given what he's put out. But then I also look at like Slow Regarded Silent Things. It's so different, and I find it tremendously interesting because he does a lot of experimentation within that book, which I don't come across a lot of things like that. But it's almost like an experimentation in like language. And I like stuff like that, where being willing to do that. I mean, it kind of shows how, I don't know if brilliant's the right word, but in terms of his artistry, it's because, I mean, if 19 years writing a book like that seems like an engineer's mind on top of an artist's mind, what I mean?
For sure.
The problem that they ran into is when he did the Slow Regarded Silent Things, and then he had another story he was writing on, his editor told him, no more stories until the next one. And they shouldn't have. They should have just let him, if he was in a groove with another book, just whatever you're in a groove with, just keep putting out books. And so like, if you need to put this on hold, the inspiration's not there, put it on hold, write as many other books as you want and just keep putting out. But they thought the backlash would be too great. And it's like, wow, well, what did you get? What'd you get out of that? You got no production at all out of it. Wow. And so it's like, well, don't, you got a cash cow, like just, go milk the cow, get your money and stay silent.
Make sure he's well fed.
On the process. Don't tell him how to do his thing or what he can write about. Like just stay out of his way. And that was a huge mistake. They should have never. And it was a mistake for him to listen. He should have told him to pound sand. I'm going to write what I want.
Right. Yeah. A perfect example of that is, I don't know if you guys know about King's Dark Tidings. It's one of my favorite series of all time. And she had written 4 books and then took, I think she took like a 4 or 5 year break. And she went and wrote some other books that weren't as good, but she needed that time to kind of recuperate. And because the first 4 books were perfect, like in every way. Like they weren't like as deep in the, like kind of all the twists and turns and all, like how deep you can get into Kingkiller, but it was the same kind of thing where you can uncover new things every time. And so she needed this period of kind of going off and trying something else, and like, it didn't do as good commercially, but it was something that she enjoyed. And then she came back and wrote the 5th book. She wrote a prequel and the 5th book, and both of those came out in the past couple months, and they are 10 out of 10. They are so good. And so I preach the word of King's Dark Tidings from the rooftops because it's so good. But it's a perfect example of a writer needing to, like, I just need to take a little bit of me time to go explore other avenues, but I'll be back. And then that makes a lot of sense. And it's a fucking home run. It's so
that makes a lot of sense to me. I even like that approach of like coming back, writing a prequel to get back into your own world, to then continue the story. That sounds so logical,
right?
Like what you just described sounds very logical. I can't imagine being stuck in a world that I've created for so long. Again, I haven't done it, but putting myself in that mind state, I think I would. I get like claustrophobic. I push it outwards just to like experiment with something else. You know?
You got to let artists do their thing, man. They're weird people.
Yeah, for sure.
There's not a lot of normal artists. I mean, there's something quirky about them. They're a different breed of people. You got to let them do their thing.
Well, and that's the thing
Definitely.
too. I mean, like for a lot of artists, like it's not even necessarily understanding your own process and discovering that process within itself. And if you're stymieing that growth in any way, shape, or form, it's probably not healthy. I would think. Like, who would know your mind better than yourself, right?
It's
Your
true.
own
Yeah.
capability than yourself. You
It's
know?
true.
So somebody get up and let's all leave Patrick alone. I guess I don't know. I don't know what's
It's
gonna
so
take.
hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard to cut him some slack sometimes.
We've said many times, if you just listen to our podcast, we've written book 3 for him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've seen that.
He can. Yeah, he can. I mean, if he wants to know how his book ends, we figured it out. We told him.
Yeah, just listen to the theories, man.
I love that. Speaking of theories, we should get into it. One more note real quick about King's Dark Tidings. I don't know if you guys listened to the audiobooks for Kingkiller, but it's the same narrator for
Oh, nice.
King's
He's
Dark
great.
Tidings.
He's
so
amazing.
amazing.
Podell or the
Nick Podell, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that I guess in the UK, Rupert, whatever his name
Yeah,
is.
and what's funny is like the people who listen to the UK one will praise it up and down.
Yeah,
and
they
say,
love it.
no, he's the greatest. You have to listen to him. But I've listened
didn't
to
like
Podell,
it.
and then I like switch over. I'm like, nah, I can't switch. And then
Yeah.
it's vice versa for them. They
Yeah.
listen to him, and then they switch to Podell, and they're like, oh, this is terrible.
Right.
It's
Isn't
like,
that weird?
Yeah, you get used to it.
And I think what that speaks to more is the story itself, because there's that nostalgia of starting this amazing story with whatever narrator you kind of grew up with, right? And so if you start the Kingkiller Chronicles with Rupert, I'm sorry, I forget his name, but
Yeah, I don't remember it either.
If you start the Kingkiller with that and go on this amazing journey with this narrator, of course you're gonna form some like emotional bond with the person who's giving you that story, and so it really speaks to how great these books are.
Yeah, and Podell's so good because like I can hear Kilvin's voice in my head.
Oh, God,
all
yes.
I got to do is think of Kilvin, and I hear Podell being Kilvin or Simon or Kavoth. Like I can hear all their voices.
Oh, for sure. It's so ingrained.
I never
point.
listened to Podell and think about him narrating. I'm just listening to the characters speak.
Oh,
I don't ever think about him.
Yep.
Unless I like stop and think like, oh man, this guy's really good. But like while I'm listening, I'm just listening to the characters. It's like he's not there.
Right.
Which is rare because normally I'm like, this is some deep voiced dudes talking like a girl. And I can clearly tell it's a deep voiced dude talking like a girl. And so it's distracting.
His female voices are so good. Like it's probably the best I've ever heard.
There's quite an art to it because it's a guy doing a female voice, and he doesn't sound like a female, but there's like a level of, it's almost like in film or television. But exactly, they're testing that element, and it's like it's a different medium, obviously, but as long as they don't break it too far. Right. And what's really funny is the guy that does the English Kingkiller Chronicles, he's read one of my favorite books, and it's the only one available on Audible for one of my favorite books. I can't stand him. It's very strange. I don't know what it is, but like listening to him deliver, I mean, I've read the book, I don't know how many times, but trying to listen to him deliver it, it just hits my ear in a particular way.
Yeah. Some audibles are tough sometimes. Like some of the guys, man, it took me a long time to get into the Song of Ice. I like the guy now. Now I can't imagine listening to someone else, but it took me longer than normal to get used to his voice. Now he's passed away. So like when the next book comes out, it'll have to be a completely different voice I'd have to get used to. So I'll just read it.
You should just do it yourself. Record your own audio.
I do. That's how I read books. I read them out loud and record it, and then I play it back to myself.
Man, it's a lot of effort.
There's a few narrators that are kind of on my like no bueno list, and Michael Kramer is one of them. And he usually does them in tandem with his wife, I believe.
Yeah.
And I really don't like audiobooks that go back and forth between multiple narrators. And so Michael Kramer is fine for the most part. Like I think he's okay, but with it constantly going back and forth, it just throws me for a loop because all their characters sound different.
Yeah, and one the problem with it sometimes, like when Kate will have a voice for one character, and then that character will show up in a chapter he's reading, and it's like, hold on, man,
right?
Like you guys are doing, you're not, your voices are not even close to the same.
Yeah, that's my exact.
So like it,
issue.
but I get used to. I mean, I've listened to like Stormlight Archives, and and
Yeah.
he's did the Wheel of Time, so you get used to it. But
right,
yeah, I could easily see where like I can't do the audiobooks where there's a bunch of people doing all the different characters and they're doing sound effects, whatever the graphic audio. Yeah, like I cannot do those.
I've only run
the noises and stuff. Like it's too distracting.
It's like theater. That's like being in a theater.
It's too distracting.
I've only ran into a couple really good ones. The ones that I really like are called Impact Winter, which is actually free on Audible. And it's kind of about a zombie vampire apocalypse type of thing. It's really good. And then the other one is Shadow's Son, which is it's kind of like Night Angel. It's about like an assassin who's kind of in this dark world. And they have full casting, but and they're really good. But I've run into so many that are just so terrible. That and like the background noises will be way louder than the people speaking.
I accidentally bought the Thrawn trilogy for Star Wars back in the a handful of years ago. I bought it and I didn't realize I bought the graphic audio of it. And then like they're doing the Star Wars noises, and it was like powered through the first book, and I was like about quarter way through the second book. I was like, nope, can't do this, man.
Yeah,
it's constant beeping and like ships taking off. It's just chill out on the noises. Couldn't do it.
I can do this in my mind.
Exactly.
Ship taking off is like, and even if I don't, just leave it for me, man.
Yeah. Well, if you guys like Nick Podell, you're gonna love King's Dark Tidings. I really hope you guys read them. There is a question that I forgot to ask you. Where can people follow your podcast? Where can they follow you?
If you look Kingkiller podcast on any podcast app, or you look us up on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Kingkiller podcast, Kingkiller, 2 words. We split them up instead of smash them together. It doesn't make any sense. But
true.
Yeah, we Kingkiller podcast on whatever you want. You can find us.
All right. So do we want to talk really briefly about have you guys been reading anything besides like Name of the Wind or Stormlight? Have you guys read anything interesting in the past little while?
I've been reading, going back through Fire and Blood.
Okay.
So like with the House of Dragons going on right now, I've been going back through Fire and Blood and going back through the history on, and I've played through the reigns of Jaehaerys and Viserys and all the stuff that goes on afterwards. And so been going through those primarily. Listen to other ones, a couple other ones too, but that's primarily the one I've been listening to.
Sweet.
I should be reading that. I keep thinking about that because I keep getting names mixed up and stuff. But it's sort of the thing that I actually finished last night. George Saunders' A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. And it's basically a compilation of some writings, some short stories by Chekhov, Tolstoy, Turgenev, somebody else, forgetting, another Russian. But it's pretty cool. I mean, because he teaches, the author George Saunders teaches writing. So he basically kind of goes through these short stories, and you can apply this to other stories. And it's kind of almost a master class on how to read, how to write, how to like build certain types of stories, and how authors build certain elements within their stories. So it's kind of like a studial, or a kind of, that's not even a word, like a studious way of looking at story. Okay. It was cool. I don't know. It's one of those paperbacks that the jacket jumped at me. I don't usually do that, but I saw it a number of times in airports, and I ended up getting it, and it was dope. I like it a lot. But yeah, it's not fantasy or anything, but
Nice.
But yeah, that's the last thing I've been reading.
Sweet. I like I mentioned earlier, I read the new King's Dark Tidings book. It was an absolute home run. We're actually having the author on in a couple weeks here, which will be pretty crazy. It's pretty
Cool.
wild to be able to. I tried getting a hold of her for like months. I reached out to her on Twitter like probably like a year ago or like 9 months ago or something, and she didn't respond for the longest time. And I was like, oh, she's not interested in some small podcast wanting an interview. And then she got back to me one day. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. This sat in my like the message requests thing on Twitter for a long time. I didn't see it. I'm like, she's like, I'd love to come on. I'm like, yes.
Wow.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So super excited for that. The other thing that I've been reading is Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar. And this is an interesting one. I'm enjoying it a lot, but it's one of those books that you pick up and you're like, oh, this is completely different than what I thought it was. So I went into it thinking, because it often kind of gets sold alongside like Holly Tinsley's We Men of Ash and Shadow. If you guys know what that is, it's like just a really like grim, dark book about like you know, this guy who used to be a soldier and is now like killing people for money and stuff. And so it's usually sold alongside that. So I was kind of like, oh, this is another like really like grim, dark book set in like a Victorian kind of era. But it's not. It's
No.
it's essentially fantasy romance, which I did not see coming.
Wow.
And so it's got like a bigger storyline to it than just like the romantic plot. And it's funny because I'm usually the guy on the podcast that really enjoys the romantic subplots in fantasy books, but this is a lot of it. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm just gonna make my way through this because I'm definitely gonna do a review on it. So I'm like, I gotta finish it. But I am enjoying it. It is good. It's, you know, I don't typically pick up romance books, but you know, for what it is, I am enjoying it quite a bit. So
Nice.
I like the idea of switching things up every now and then, reading something that's completely different than what you typically would. Sometimes that's a pretty big task, but there are times where I've done that and then I end up reading 6 books by the same writer.
Yes.
And I never, you know, and I just went to experiment, you know, so it's cool.
I like to tell people when they're reading like a romance novel like Daniel Steele, like, oh, you like Daniel Steele, you'll love Game of Thrones. Exactly the same type of book.
Exactly.
Like, really? Oh.
This great love story between these Lannisters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have to every like 7 or 8 fantasy books, I have to switch to a different genre, whether it's like sci-fi or what I'll do often is I'm really into Dean Koontz. And so I'll often pick up like a Dean Koontz book and just kind of get into like a mystery thriller suspense kind of book for a little while. And then just like you said, I end up reading like 3 of them in a row. And I'm like, oh, I should probably get back to reading fantasy for the podcast, but you know, but yeah, it's nice to go into those other genres because then you come back to fantasy and you kind of remember why you love it, right? So
yeah.
This kind of another one of the things that always kind of cracks me up when we would talk about people mad at Rothfuss and Martin. It's like, dude, I don't have the time to read all the books I want to read. I just wish I did. I wish there was a way to make that possible, but there's not. And it's one of those things like knowing you're going to die. You know, you just won't have the time. Good luck selecting. It's just kind of, you allow it to come into your orbit and then, you know, hopefully you're able to find the right book at the right time. You know,
I've read every single book that I've ever wanted to read. Read them all.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I just don't want to read very many books, so
you keep it
much
limited.
easier that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, well, we are going to go into spoiler territory. We're going to talk about some of these Kingkiller theories. We're going to get super deep into them. Everything is fair game, whether it's Name of the Wind, the Ari book, what was it?
Slow regard of
silent things, or Wise Man's Fear. All of it's on the table to talk about. So if you haven't read those books, then definitely, you might want to come back to this podcast at a later time so that you're not getting super spoiled, because we're going to go into a lot of shit here. So that being said, your spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1, you've been warned. Before we get going, I want to give a quick shout out to 2 channels besides the Kingkiller podcast that, they do amazing Kingkiller theories. But obviously, Jay from Captured in Words, I've been watching a ton of his videos. He has some great speculative theories where he kind of throws a bunch of theories into a pot and kind of mixes it all up for each topic relating to Kingkiller. And then another one that I just stumbled upon is the Super Carlin Brothers channel, who have a few theories that they've uploaded. They mostly do other content, but they have 6 or 7 Kingkiller videos, I think. And I'll link my favorite one in the description below. We'll probably touch on it in this discussion, I would imagine, but it's really good. I think it'll really blow your mind. And I'll have both their channels linked below in the description, or maybe just like their Kingkiller theory playlist or something, so that you can check them out as well. But to start us out here, I guess I have 2 questions that could be the same thing, or they could be like 2 completely different answers. So I'll ask both these questions and you guys can kind of decide how you want to answer it. So what is your favorite theory or theories? But also, what are some of the most airtight theories that you've heard or come up with?
My favorite theory is probably the Master Ash theories. I think those are extremely interesting, and it's a integral theory to book 3. That's probably my favorite theory. The most airtight is Natalia Lackless. That theory is easily the most airtight.
Yeah, that's slam dunk.
Yeah. I don't think that. I mean, that's one. I don't know if I necessarily picked that up on first read, but definitely by second, it's like, oh yeah, that's definitely the case here.
Same. Yeah.
That seems pretty clear. But yeah, I mean, my favorite theory is probably got to be that fella goes to the Fae to work her second job at Jack in the Box.
That's not even the character. It's Denna.
Oh shit! I said I'm out of practice.
I don't even know
bro.
the theories we come up with on our podcast. That's one of our hidden subtext theories that we discuss on the podcast, that Denna is actually traveling to the Fae to work a second job at Jack in the Box.
That's why she's disappearing all the time.
Yeah, that's why she dips out. She's a shift manager at Jack in the Box. We have a lot of amazing airtight theories that we discover in the subtext that probably Rothfuss is not even aware of.
Some are quite shocking. I would also say the idea of Ambrose and Kavoth being best friends and running a duo together.
Yeah,
that's a big one.
That's one to look forward to. Book 3. But yeah, I'd say Master Ash is the most interesting because who her patron is extremely important. What the motivations of her patron is extremely important. What her motivation is with being with the patron is extremely important. And so there's so much going on with Denna behind the scenes that we're not privy to, that is clearly integral to what is going to happen in book 3. And so that theory is a linchpin theory. Like, once you know what's going on with her patron and what her motivations are and what her patron's motivations are, a lot of the other pieces start falling into place once you know that. And it's one of the more interesting, because you can make a extremely solid argument for 2 different characters, and you can't disprove one or the other. I mean, there's so many clues that fit 2 different characters, and none of the clues rule out the other character. And who
else? Sorry, who else besides Brayden?
Brayden and Cinder.
Well, yeah, but wouldn't they? Do you guys think they're the same person?
No, they almost certainly are not the same person. That is a theory that they are possibly the same person, but I don't think it fits, especially when their personalities are dramatically different. Like Braden seems like a kind of a Machiavellian type of dude, but he doesn't seem like he's an evil type of person. And Kavoth, when he sees, there's a couple of big pieces. Like one, Kavoth, when he sees Cinder in the woods in the Eld, when he fights the bandits, he knows immediately there's something wrong with this person. This is not a normal human. There's something different about him. All of them, even Tempe and Martin, everybody looks at that guy and is like, that's not normal. And when they look at it with Braden, he spends so much time with Braden and he never notices anything out of the ordinary with him. So I think partially makes it unlikely, but also when he talks to the Cathay says that he's met Cinder twice. And he's like, this is a twice in a lifetime experience that you had. And so there's no way you could describe his interactions with Braden as he's met, he's spent all this time with Cinder as he's seen Cinder twice, if Braden is also Cinder. So I don't think there's too many reasons to disbelieve that they are the same person. So I don't think that they're the same person. No, but I think that there's a reason why I could easily see that they have some kind of connection with each other, that maybe Braden is working with Cinder, or maybe Braden is like kind of a Machiavellian type of guy that's playing off of the Amir and the Chandrian, and he's kind of working both sides. I think there's definitely something up with Braden, that there's definitely more than we see on the surface, but I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think he's Amir?
I think it's possible. I think there's a good scene when Puppet is talking to Kavoth and Willem and Sem, and when he's talking to them, he's doing a little puppet show.
Yeah, I've tried to dissect that a bunch of times, but I'm not smart enough to figure it out.
Well, the puppet show, let me see if I have the notes for it, but when he goes through and he starts describing all the movements and everything, it's clear that he's describing like that's Denna, is the girl, the priest is beating Denna, and he's making her read the book of the path, and he's punishing her for something, and it's clear that the puppet, this description is a description of Master Ash and Denna, is what he's doing a puppet show of. And I don't have the specifics of what he says in front of me right this second, but when you go through it, you could tell if you have that background with it, you go through that scene, you'll be able to see that this is clearly describing Denna being beaten by her patron. And so there's some kind of clairvoyance going on with Puppet, at least. Okay. And he's looking at Kavoth the way he's talking about it. And he's like, when Kavoth is looking at it, he's saying things like, you're looking, but you don't see it. And and so he's hinting at something with him. So I think there's something likely when you see that it's a Talon priest in that little puppet show, that there might be something to do with that. He has some kind of relation with the Amir through the Talon church, or that he's got some kind of relation with the angels, or he's got some kind of relation with the Chandra. He's definitely a bigger player than what we see. He's playing and he talks about he's playing a beautiful game, and he's obviously playing a much bigger game. So who he's with, I don't know. I mean, it's too hard to tell, because you could make so many cases for so many different things. But I think the most likely it would be that has some kind of connection through the Talon church or the Mender church, with maybe the Amir or something along those lines. So, yeah.
One of the things that does kind of in some way hint at the Amir is, you mentioned Braden not being evil. And I agree, he's not outright evil, but he is willing to do evil things, right? He's willing to do things that could be construed as evil.
Braden?
Or, yes, like beating Denna. Now he's doing it for the greater good, right?
So
if you're assuming that he's Master Ash, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm doing here. I'm going through
Yeah,
the
yeah.
assumption and then applying it, which Cinder seems outright evil. He seems evil incarnate. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I agree that he also looks. We kind of dissected this, and it is actually what I would say is my favorite theory because of how meticulously Rothfuss gave us two options that could both apply, that don't cancel one another out, that gives plenty of justification with the attributes that we have that describe Master Ash, like his ability to move, like how he dance and all that stuff. Braden says that he was learning how to dance, right? And how he's surprisingly light on his feet is what Dennis said. Cinder is not surprisingly light on his feet. He's like an animal. He's like the way he moves, it's described as if he's like Quicksilver.
Like Quicksilver, yeah.
Yeah. So like that's like again, that's extremely
describing like saying like Michael Jackson was surprisingly good at the moonwalk. It's like no. He's
he had rhythm.
Of it.
Yeah. He was surprisingly had some rhythm. Yeah. Yes. But just that thought, when you mentioned that about Braden, I made a note to myself, he's not outright evil, but he's willing to do evil. And that's one thing that always caught me about the Amir is that they do some evil shit. They do it for what they think is the greater good, right? Isn't that on the book Made Out of Skin, basically? Is that the Amir, that's something of that vein that they do. They break some eggs, basically, is what they're doing.
So I give you here's the scenario with Puppet. Found it in my notes. So the way it happens is, and this, I just cut out all the conversation that was in between the puppet show and just cut out the puppet show. And so it's Puppet sits a marionette of Kavoth to watch. And then she approached the Talon and held out a hand as if trying to give him something. No, she was asking him a question. The Talon turned his back on her. She laid a timid hand on his arm. He took a haughty step away. The Talon suddenly turned on the girl, trembling with rage. It menaced her with the book. She took a startled step backward and stumbled to her knees. The Talon struck the girl with the book once, twice, driving her to the ground where she lay terribly still. The Talon brought its hands together and turned away from the crumpled woman, took a stately step or two away and bowed its head as if praying. The Talon at its feet stood and started to dance and caper about. Now, like all the different things in that description fit much better if that's Braden doing those things, and then Cinder. Cinder seems cruel. This person, the priest in this story, seems that it's more of a punishment as far as she's not living up to something, or she's not obeying him. So it's still, he's hitting a girl. There's something wrong with doing that. But I don't like Cinder. Seems to be like he takes pleasure in being cruel.
Yeah,
it's not like he's not using it as a lesson. He's just doing it just to do it because it's fun for him. Like, I mean, he taunts a little kid after he probably raped and murdered his mom and dad, and then he's taunting a little kid and dancing on top of their corpses, basically.
Yeah.
So he's a pretty sadistic dude. He doesn't seem to like it. It seems far-fetched that Denna would spend so much time with a psychopath and stick it out, considering how quickly she will leave from a dangerous situation. And for it to be spending all this time with Cinder, of all people, it would seem odd to me.
But he can teach her things she can't learn elsewhere.
I think you could make an excuse for it. I think you could come up reasons why that it is Cinder and that she stuck it out. I find it harder to come up with reasons for her sticking around with Cinder than I could with Braden.
Well, then the question also becomes, what is he using her for? Why Denna, of all people, is the Chandrian going after her? What is her lineage? So that just brings up so many questions. And that's kind of one of the things we went through is you have to weigh all these things with what makes it a better line of story, a better line of narrative. Also, what's the cleaner writing? Like what's the better sort of version? And when you do that with Cinder versus Braden, it definitely seems like Braden would be the better choice out of the two if it's Rothfuss's doing. And there was a couple examples that you brought up. I can't bring it to mind exactly right now, but where Cinder's, it's not as clean. You know what I'm saying? Well, so for example, you met him twice. I mean, if you're going to say he met Cinder twice, they play Go or whatever the game they play. So many.
Well, that
times.
rules out Brendan. That Braden, I think, but I don't think that rules out Cinder as being Master Ash because he's never met Master Ash.
Yeah, I'm kind of playing both the arguments here. That Braden and Cinder are the same person. Yeah, I don't think that's the case, but yeah, I think Braden as Master Ash is it's a really solid theory, and the questions. I mean, they abound. It's everywhere. But also, yeah, if what are the ramifications if that's the case, or the opposite? You know, they're really important.
So I have a couple points real quick. So do you guys think that Cinder, the first one is, do you think that Cinder would be able to, because we saw him take on a different form in that encampment where, Quoth lit up the tree. Do you think that Cinder would be able to mellow out some of his like crazy animalistic, like sadistic side, and kind of tone it down to be able to appear as a normal person to Denna enough to be this Master Ash person?
I think he would, if he was Braden, he would have to. I mean, 100%. He would have to be so good at it that he could fool Kavoth. If he's not Braden, but he's also Master Ash, he still would have to be able to do it in a way that doesn't. Because Denna is also very observant. She's almost a mirror of Kavoth in so many respects. She's almost she's so similar to him in so many respects, and seems to be going along the same path. But of course he could. I don't know. He just seems like such a psychopath that I would need to know more about him. We know so little about him. And I would need to know more about him and how he's able to rein in his craziness, because it didn't seem like he's all that willing to rein it in when he was with Haliax. It seemed like he took offense to Haliax even challenging him on it. And so it seems like he's pretty set on being a crazy person.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course he could. There's 100%. There's no reason that he couldn't be Cinder. He's definitely not anything that eliminates him as a candidate. He's got so many clues that point to him, so it's perfectly reasonable to believe that Cinder is Master Ash.
That does also, again, though, bring up the questions of the motivation. Why Denna? Why is he spending his time doing this? Of the other things that he could be doing, the other people he could be torturing throughout the world.
Yeah, and like one of the big questions would be, why would Cinder need Denna to spy on the Mothin farm for him? I mean, if he can mingle with people in disguise perfectly fine, you would think he would just want to do that himself, because they're going to kill everybody anyways. They're not going to leave any witnesses. So why would you bring Denna to be a potential witness? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense if that's Cinder. I mean, you can come up with reasons for it. It just, to me, if Cinder ends up being Master Ash, that's going to be one of the scenes I'm going to be like, well, that kind of weakens that scene. Why Denna's there? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Why the Chandrian would need Denna. And like, if you need her for some bigger purpose, why would you risk her being a witness to finding out that you're the Chandrian? Like, all he did was like, hey, just chill out here for a second. Don't come walking 10 feet and see me turn into Cinder and start murdering people. Right. Like, it just seems weak if that's the case. Where if it's like Braden and he's just trying to be this Machiavellian behind the shadows type of guy, and he sends her in there to do all that work, and then he just kind of like pokes his head out to see if the Chandrians show up, and he's asking her, who are the people you saw? How many people were there? He's trying to see if the Chandrian are there. If the numbers, like, say if like he expected the party to be 15 people, but there's 22 people there, and then he knows all the Chandrian are there. Things like that. You can come up with reasons why. I think it's easier to come up with reasons why Braden would need a spy than Cinder. Right. Especially considering they're going to kill everybody there.
Yeah. And speaking of Braden, Tim, you mentioned like Braden isn't evil, but if he is Ash, he's willing to do evil things. Have you guys heard the theory that when the Cathay says, like, he beats her, right, and all this stuff, Have you guys heard the theory that he's beating her at a game of tack? Or like it is kind of a play with the words, and then like the bruises and stuff that she has, he's like teaching her how to fight or teaching her how to like sword fight or whatever.
Yeah, we've talked about that. We've come like what I've said on the podcast a number of times is, if you look at the story from Dennis' perspective, if we were getting it from Dennis' perspective, and we saw Kavoth and he's showing up, he's got welts on his back, he's got all these whippings, and he's getting brutalized at the school and everything, and people treat him like shit there. And if you were just looking at it from her perspective and you didn't know what was going on, you'd be like, why are you there? These guys are monsters. These are terrible human beings. But since we are getting the story from Kavoth's perspective, we don't look at the masters as like they're monsters. I think it's wrong for them to whip him, but I don't think that they're evil people for doing it. And so there's plenty of reasons you could come up with that are not evil, that he would be beating her or punishing her, or they're practicing fighting or things along those lines, where the Cathay is telling him something that is true, but he's telling him something that's true in a misleading way. Whereas like he is hitting her, but it's not malicious. It's not, he's not evil. There is a purpose for it. Or maybe he is kind of a prick. I mean, maybe he is, and maybe it is. He just gets him. He just wants. It's just a game to him. Maybe Braden is not that great of a guy. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Sure.
Like you see him when he plays Kavoth and Tack, and Kavoth's like, "Oh man, I'm getting up on you. I'm getting you now." And he's like, "Okay, let's play for real."
Yeah.
And then when he plays him, Kavoth, the way Kavoth describes him is like, this dude is gangster. This guy is vicious.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's actually really, really revealing about Braden in terms of the lengths that he'll go, and also just the type of character he is. It gives a lot more depth to him, and being a bit ruthless, which is funny because it's a game of Tack, right? They're playing checkers, whatever.
Right.
But it reveals so much in a really cool and pretty subtle way.
One of the theories that I like off of kind of Braden being Master Ash is like, I could see a scenario with Denna is that she's basically on the hero's journey. Like, you hear Kavoth talk about it, and he's like, you meet the hermit in the wood, and he teaches you all these, these magic powers, and then and maybe she met Braden, like similar. She's, in the woods with him. It's like he's kind of seems like a crazy hermit type of person. So maybe she's on the hero's journey and she's learning magic. She's clearly learning some kind of magic from Braden. It seems like she's learned Yillish knots, the magical Yillish knots, like when she ties beautiful in her hair and it makes Kavoth see beautiful, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So she seems to be learning some kind of magic from him. And if it could be that he's guiding her and pushing her in a direction. And so I could see a scenario where Kavoth and Denna are together and open the doors of stone, unleash hell on the world. And she plays the role of the hero and sacrifices herself. Like maybe she goes behind the doors and closes them shut, and she's locked behind the door. And so I could see a situation where Kavoth puts Denna in a position where she has to sacrifice herself to be the hero, and Kavoth is just living with complete remorse and regret over what he did, the mistake he made. And he knows that in order to save Denna, he would have to open the door and unleash hell again. And he's like, and in order to prevent himself from doing that, he goes and Ari changes his name, uses shaping to change his name. She fundamentally changes him. He locks things away in his box in his thrice-locked chest, and that prevent him from being able to recover his self again. And the torment is that he wants to be able to go try to save Denna, or to get to Denna, or to revive Denna, or something along those lines. But in order to do that, he would have to be able to get back in his chest, but he's already locked away what he would need to be able to get behind the door. He locks those things away, and able to save her, whatever he needs is in that chest, and he's not able to get it. And he knows that if he does get it, that he did try to save her, it could cause so many problems. So he's dealing with I think, you could come up with a scenario where the reason he's waiting to die is because he's living in torment, where he wants to save her or bring her back, but the consequences of doing that mean disaster. So no matter what he does, he's in a lose-lose situation.
Wow. Yeah, man. If Patrick Rothfuss would just listen to your podcast, that's the book right there.
Yeah. That's kind of because it's got to be a tragedy. So like you think like, how is this going to end tragically? And it's got to be a situation where he's just racked with regret and remorse, and he wishes he could change things that he can't change.
That's the prologue.
But there's a number of different ways you could come up with on that.
Sure.
But that's definitely the case of where he's at. I mean, he's a man waiting to die, and he's just loaded with guilt, racked with guilt, doesn't have his abilities, looks different, he's coat, all of it. I mean, it's such an interesting way to deliver that story as well. I mean, just the narrative itself, the way it spins out, it's tremendous because it opens tragedy, right? It opens with tragedy, and then we just keep revisiting it. Yeah. It's such an interesting narrative, man. I don't have other examples.
It's a weird book, and it's so fun to read. It's so enjoyable to read. And he sets the stage with saying like, all right, here's this guy, screwed everything up. It's tragic and it's going to end horribly. Enjoy the ride. And then you do.
Yeah.
Like,
even
though it's not going to end well.
I love that. All right. So you guys mentioned Puppet earlier in his little office downstairs. Why do you guys think that Puppet is allowed to have candles in his room? Do you guys have any ideas for that?
I think he's just one of these special cases that there's something clearly very different about him, and he's special in a powerful way. Like he's clearly powerful in his naming. Like, I mean, when he's like looking at Kaboth and they're like, oh, well, he's an Illyr. He's like, nah, you're not an Illyr. You might be an Illyr someday, not yet. And you're, those kind of things. Like, he clearly sees the world in a different way, similar to Loden. And so I think it could be a situation where he's more in tune with the deeper inner turnings of like the world, as far as like the big stories on the Amir versus the Chandrian. I think he's just a much bigger player than a typical student. And so he's just given more leeway because of his prestige within the ranks of the people who are in the know.
Yeah. Okay.
I kind of had the same feeling. I mean, he just seems, when you mentioned about Elodin, he seems to be on that level of just, much more like he's like in tune. He knows the names of things. He can see through what like Kaboth's history, and he's like clairvoyant. That's very, very powerful. So why he's allowed candles in the library? That's a very good question. Clearly he's trusted. That's saying a lot. That's saying that he's trusted by the highest authorities in the university with something extraordinary.
Yeah, especially dangerous. Master Lauren trusting him with candles, because that guy is such a hard ass in the books. Like that, the idea that he would trust someone, and it's almost certain that Master Lauren is a member of the Amir. And so if he's like trusting him on that kind of level, it seems more than likely that Puppet is involved in bigger things than just what you would see on the surface, or at least he used to be, and maybe he's cracked. And so this is just kind of, him and his kind of retirement position where they just let him be off on his own and just don't mess with him.
Sorry, I was going to mention Puppet was one of those characters that to me, it felt like he wrote a lot more and like didn't use it. You know what I mean?
He definitely did. He's got a scene he wrote that he didn't put in the books that he's read.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't.
You can find it online.
Okay.
But there's a chapter that he cut out of the book that you can find online. That's another chapter for Puppet. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I'll definitely have to check that out. there's some theories going around that Puppet is somehow, I can't remember exactly how it all connects together, but somehow he is guarding for the coming of the Chandrian. So he has all those candles because, they'll turn blue when the Chandrian shows up. And some have said that maybe his room is like, because it's in the library, right? Like he has a room in the library. And so some have said that like his room might be adjacent to the 4-plate door, and that he's like guarding something in whatever is in there, whether it's the tomb of Jax or whatever's in there. He's kind of guarding against the Chandrian getting to it. He's kind of the first line of defense to be like, hey, everybody, there's Chandrian coming.
Yeah, it could be something like that. Wouldn't be surprise me at all if he's there to protect against someone opening the 4-plate door. I think what's behind the 4-plate door is almost certainly King Phasia, the Sleeping Barrow King. Fella mentions that she had a dream about a sleeping king behind that door. Kvothe rescues princesses back from the Sleeping Barrow King. Rothfuss is nearly confirmed that the Sleeping Barrow King is King Phasia, who's a Draug. It's almost certain that those are all connected together. Okay. My theory would be that behind the 4-plate door is Fey Rheinial, and that's the place that Kvothe tells a story about a bum walking through Fey Rheinial, which they say is like the place where you can't discover it by any road, but it leads to all other places. And it's where that bum travels through, and he runs into the different groups where he's trying to get a piece to eat, something to eat, and they keep turning him down until he finally finds some Rue who treat him like a decent human being. And so I think that character is named Skiop. I think Skiop is almost surely Scarpy. And there's various reasons why. I mean, their descriptions are very similar, and I also think there's a theory I go through in one of the episodes where Scarpy and Skiop and the Tinker and the story about Jack stealing the moon are all the same character. And like, because there's the Tinker that loses he loses his pack and he loses his hat and he loses all his stuff in that story with Jax. And then the story with Skiop and Fey Rheinial, it talks about like he's traveling in Fey Rheinial without anything to his name, no pack or anything. Like the way they describe it is the same way of what Jax took from him. And so I think what we're seeing is that Scarpy is probably one of the Ruach, who's like kind of an immortal figure. That is the reason he knows all these stories is because he lived them. And he was there for all of them. And so he's been around the whole time. He's probably like a big figure in the mirror. But I do think that they're all the same characters. And I think Fey Rheinial is obviously a prominent place. And in Fey Rheinial, there was a circle of Greystones. Kvothe also dreams about a circle of Greystones. When his parents are killed and he's in the woods by himself and he falls asleep, he has a dream about how to survive in the woods. And then part of that dream also is Abinthy showing him sailor's knots, which is probably Yillish knots is what he's probably showing him. And then he also sees the circle of Greystones. And so I think it was likely someone implanting information in his head to help him keep him alive, but also kind of sending him like an arrow into the night on his path, that circle of Greystones and the Yillish knots are going to be important to him down the line. And I think that likely someone like the Angels were trying to keep him alive and also present him with information that he would need at a later date. And I think that those are going to come into line, that he's going to get into Fey Rheinial at some point. And I think that circle of Greystones, that's what I think is the Doors of Stone. I think that there's in Fey, once you get into Fey Rheinial, I think King Phasia, maybe he's like guarding the Circle of Greystones to prevent someone from letting out Ajax and unleashing hell on the world. And I think that that there's going to be some kind of connection between Scarpy helping Kavoth get through the 4-plate door to get into Faerenial. And I think that's where Kavoth's going to unleash hell on the world, is opening up the 4-plate door, but more importantly, opening up the doors of stone. I don't think they're the same thing. I think they're one leads to a place where you can get to the doors of stone.
Wow. That's an incredible theory that I don't think I've ever heard that one before. You mentioned the Ruach. Is that what you called Scarpy?
Yeah. So when Scarpy tells his story to Kavoth about Lanre becoming Haliax, like his second story is a meeting where Scarpy is talking to Aleph. Aleph's like the god of the world. He's like the guy that created everything. And Aleph talks to the Ruach, which was all the people, the immortals of that time. He's talking to all the immortals. Basically, I look at it as the way I imagine it is that the Ruach are kind of like the Greek gods. Aleph is kind of like Zeus. And then you have the other Greek gods are all the Ruach. And then you had people below them. And the Ruach were in a meeting. And so Aleph said, you could join me and you can become angels. And people like Telu and some other people joined him and became angels. Scarpy wanted to get revenge on the Chandrian, and Aleph was like, no, we're not. You can't go back on past deeds. It's got to be fresh slate. We're starting from scratch. And he was like, well, that's not good enough. So I'm going to start the Amir. So some of the Ruach become angels like Telu. Some of them become Amir and follow Scarpy. And then other portions of the Ruach went their own separate way and went and did their own thing. And so I think you probably get the Adem and the Ru and the Tinkers. I think you get and those groups, and like someone like Felurian, they probably all come from the Ruach, and just some of them went to the Fae, some of them went to the real world, and then you get the Adem and the Ru, and then you get people in the Fae, and I think they all spawned from the Ruach that went their own separate ways, that didn't join the angels and didn't join the Amir.
Wow, that's incredible. How did you figure that out?
Well, that is spelled out. It's spelled out that some of the Ruach became angels and some of the Ruach became Amir. That's specifically said. And then they say some of the Ruach went a separate way. And then, but it's a quick line. He doesn't like harp on it. So if you're not digging into it, you just roll right through it. And it's just, you hear the story, Telu, Scarpy, boom, boom. Yeah. And you move on. But he also talked about another group of the Ruach going and doing their own thing. And then you start thinking like, why do the Adem have these special swords? Adem, Ademaru, they seem like the etymology of the words seem to fit. They're both kind of traveling the land, nomadic people for long portions of their history. The Ademaru are the greatest performers, the greatest storytellers that ever lived. They're way better than everybody else. Why are they so special? Something different about them. And there's something different about Kavoth. Yeah. And then like the Adem, why are all the women fighters so phenomenal and so much better than the men? That doesn't make any sense physiologically if they're just like normal humans. Yeah. There's got to be something different about them. And so you start, and then why do they have these swords that don't break? And they have all this history and lore, and their training ground is like centered around of that tree that's obviously extremely special in this world. And they have their fights by a big gray stone and stuff. There's something deeper going on with them. And they know the history of the Chandrian. They know their names. She gave them their true names. Yeah, and we know they're pretty accurate because Haliax called Cinder Ferula, and she told Kavoth that his name was Ferula, or it's either Ferul and Ferula or vice versa, whatever. Right. They were off by one letter. So but she obviously they have very deep information, and the Ru have this affinity towards the Greystones, and they always stop at the Greystones. They seem to have a deeper understanding of the history of the world. And I think it's because they spawn from the people that go all the way back to the very beginning, to the creation war.
Whew, man.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff, man. Like you can go so deep on these books. Like there's so much. And like the Tinkers, there's a line where Florian, when she's talking about the Tinkers, and Kavoth's like, if you guys are traveling in and out, how have I never seen you before? How have I never noticed? And she goes, we know enough not to be seen. And she talks about like, we can travel through your land like a pack mule laden. And you have these Tinkers rolling through with their pack mules laden with all these goods. And it's almost surely that the Tinkers are at least from the Fae, but they're also, and they're feared. Like we've never seen them do anything other than trade goods, but nobody messes with a Tinker. And Rothfuss has been adamant that the worst thing you could possibly do is mess with a Tinker. Disaster would fall upon you if you mess with the Tinker. And that's why nobody does. Because otherwise they have so many goods and they're just walking by themselves unguarded. People would be robbing them left and right.
It's true.
They also have a touch of clairvoyance as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when they tell you need something, turns out you did, because the goods that Kavoth turns down from the Tinkers would have played significant parts to the story. It would have helped him out. He turns down, like the first Tinker he meets when he goes to Traben, and that's when he rescues Denna and has the fight with the Dracus. Like he turns down the strawberry wine, which Denna was like, "Oh, I wish you would have got the strawberry wine. It's my favorite." Turns down a rope, which Denna's idea was to hang the rope over a cliff's edge and the dinner resin, and the Dracus would have killed itself. So the rope would have came into handy. There was something else as well.
Mobbit wax for his boots or something.
That was the second one. But in the second one, he turned down the wax for his boots, which when he's in the Eld, he's complaining about his shoes always constantly being wet. Whatever they told him he would need, he should take, it would have came into play in the story. And some of the parts intricately came into play. So there's some clairvoyance going on there.
That is so brilliant. Until this podcast, you guys have mentioned it a couple times now. I had never even considered anyone from Kingkiller being clairvoyant in any way.
Ari almost certainly is as well too.
Yeah, that is such a good argument for it. I never knew that about the Tinkers. That's brilliant. What about Ari?
Ari in Slow Regarded Silent Things, it starts off where she's like, Kavoth's going to show up in like 7 days. And so I got to be ready. And she's like, he's going to be bringing a gift. And so I got to find him the perfect gift. And then she has this moment where she gets this gear and she drops it and it shatters into 3 pieces. And then all of a sudden realization dawns on her and she goes, wait, he's not going to show up tomorrow. He's going to show up today. And he's going to bring me 3 gifts. So I have to have 3 gifts for him. And then he does. He shows up that day with 3 gifts. Kavoth, when you go into the story and you connect when these events happen and when it happens in Wise Man's Fear versus when it happens in Slow Regard, Kavoth had no idea he was going to go meet with Ari that day. There was no plan. He wasn't like, we made a date and I got to show up. He just happened to show up that day and he happened to bring 3 gifts with him. But she knew it without talking to Kavoth. And it's clearly clairvoyant. And she also says at one point, the reason I think she's going to be the one that changes his name, seems like she's a shaper. You can get the sense, like if you read the chapter when she is making the candle for him, there's something magical going on. And she's when she draws all her power to her and all things shook and all things, and she describes it in this magical, elaborate way. It feels like something heavy went down and she shaped this candle. So and I think it's almost surely an example of shaping. But she says that there's going to be a point where Kavoth is going to be in trouble and he's going to need a place to hide. One of her gifts was, I got you a bed down here. If you ever get in trouble, you can come down here. And the reason she got him that, she's like, there's going to be a time where he needs a place to hide and he can come to me. And just like he gave me a new name, if he needs a new name, I can give him a new name at that time.
Oh, that's what she says in Slow Regard.
Yeah.
Oh, dang. I haven't finished Slow Regard yet, but that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah,
It contains huge pieces. I mean, because that with that part of the story, and there's a interesting overlap of the time that creates some controversy amongst people spinning theories, but it gives huge pieces as to just how much bigger a figure she is.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you kind of know that reading it. You read it a couple times, you can tell there's a lot going on with her. She's not just some hurt figure. You know,
Right.
she has some power. She has some capabilities. She looms really large in the story. Her chapters are amazing. Again, just kind of stepping back. I mean, talk about bringing out the book or filling out the book. Her chapters are completely different than the rest of the book in so many ways that to me is amazing. That's what to me is so great about the story is, yeah, it's fantasy. That's the genre, but it's so built out in multiple ways in terms of the experience that you have with a Loden or the experience that you have with the Dem, and it's amazing. It's great. I'm gonna say it's great again.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it gets deep when you go into it, because and it's not just to say like all the, it's definitely going to go this way. Like pretty much every theory you can come up with, you can come up with alternate theories as well, and there's so many different ways you can come. Like he's left himself so much room where he has the room to spin the story in so many different directions that would fit and would all make sense. It's just a matter of what he feels is going to tell the best story. But there's so many open-ended answers to so many questions.
Yeah.
There's something you brought up there I think is worth touching on that I find really interesting. There's obvious parallels between Dinah and Kavoth, right?
Yeah.
And maybe she's the hero, he's the hero. They have a very similar timeline or experiences in different ways. He mirrors in many ways Ari as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she is very much I don't know, at risk. She's very vulnerable. He has those vulnerabilities as well. He just hides them, right? She hides herself. So, but she opens up to him. She's barely opened up to Loden, but she sees herself as the savior for Kavoth. He sees himself as a savior for her. Like these parallels are tremendous, man. And the way that he spins them, and that we have these trajectories. And like you said, one of the great things is like you can thwart all of them. All of these theories, you could thwart them, or they can tie in and become, the beautiful story. The game that's being played.
Right.
Our office is spinning us all around.
Do you guys think that that Ari has any connection to either Princess Ariel or Tabitha that gets mentioned?
I would be surprised if it was Tabitha. There's reasons you could believe that it is Tabitha, because like there's talk of the girl that Ambrose probably raped and then sent her off somewhere.
She went crazy.
And Ari, there's a remark by Ari where she's talking about like feeling the hot breath of the unwanted touch of a man and something like that, where it seems like she's describing a situation where she was raped. And so you could see a scenario where that is the case. I would be surprised just because it seems like Ari, I don't know. I don't know that he'll go the route that like Ambrose. It just seems so on the nose. Yeah. That like to make her into the victim of Ambrose, rape victim, and that's why she's down there. She's cracked because of that. I think it's more complicated. But it could be. But Ariel, I definitely think she's Princess Ariel. I definitely think she is.
Okay.
Yeah. There's multiple reasons. You guys could talk and I can see if I can find my notes on just run through some of the reasons.
In regards to the Ambrose thing, we already hate him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could ratchet it up if you want. And if there's this moment where they're in a room and Ambrose sees her right. and Kavoth's there as well. And yeah, all three of them, they're together and it comes to light. Kavoth just sees on her face the devastation or something. That could ratchet it up. He gets red hot, does something, Yeah, I could see that. But I remember when we sort of delved into it, I just kind of felt like it seems unnecessary to the effect that we already hate Ambrose. We have plenty of reason, but it is there. The whole thing with Tabitha is there. Is it just there? And this is something we also talk about a lot as well, because there's so much. Everything seems to matter, right? And
Right.
everything
Yeah.
does matter. So everything begs more. Like, what's that mean? What does this mean? Who's this name? They all seem to matter. And maybe Tabitha's the only one that does it.
Yeah, I mean, it could be part of the some of the big clues that she's princess, is a lot of it's her the noble manners. Like, you have so many descriptions of with Ari where it was like she tore small pieces from a loaf and chewed them delicately, somehow making the whole process look genteel. Step
Courtly
sideways,
bow.
that was almost curtsy,
Yeah.
almost a curtsy. Formal dinner in some nobleman's hall, having tea with the kings. She sat with her back straight. What would she do if her tiny kingdom was invaded by a stranger? He made it,
Yeah.
and then like Alodin, when he meets her, he Caboth remarks that he made a curiously formal bow in return to her. So there's indications that the way she talks and the way she interacts, like, she does not take hand-me-downs. She won't wear, she lives in the sewers basically, and she will not wear secondhand clothes.
Right.
She's very prim and proper, but she's also commanding. Like, when you see her interacting with Alodin, she's like putting Alodin on his back heels, and he's like sitting there bowing to her and feeling awkward around her. And Alodin does that to everybody else. And so she's got a lot of things that make it seem like she's probably noble at the least. And so, and then there's a kind of a parallel between the two girls that Caboth rescues that were being raped by the fake Rue Troop, and they kind of parallel Denna and Ari. Like, you have one of the girls that's like Ari is Elle, who's the broken girl, and she doesn't talk and all those kind of things, and it takes them a while to kind of coax it out of her. Her name's Elle, and then you have Ari plus Elle, Ariel.
Oh shit.
And so, like, there's things along, just even little subtle clues like that kind of point towards her being Princess Ariel.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's crazy.
What do you call it? The table manners is a huge one. Because she's very like you don't talk while you're eating the meal. It's there's a lot of that. I mean, I know you touched on it, but there's a lot, like the cup has to be proper. Like, everything has its place. She's very, I mean, she's very got some OCD stuff going on as well, but she does seem to be, if you're raised that way, it doesn't go away, even though she's living in the sewers.
And you get like when they exchange gifts, and then she's like, all right, now play for me, entertain me.
Right.
Those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even Alodin is like, why did you name her Ari? Like, that is it impresses him so much that he allows Quoth into his class to be more or less mentored by him, which he was not going to do. And so Alodin recognizes that Quoth has this knack for naming, which, I mean, I think we all know, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like it's so on the nose almost.
Yeah, and when you think like that, there's princesses rescued from a sleeping Barrow King, and like I said, I think it's highly likely that King Phasia is the sleeping Barrow King behind the 4-plate door. It would make perfect sense if Ari somehow gets behind the 4-plate door. Maybe Devi. Devi seems hell-bent on getting into the archives. Maybe she finds out about Ari, and they force their way behind. She uses Ari to force her way behind the 4-plate door. Ari's able to get back there somehow, maybe through the under thing. And Caboth has to rescue Devi and Ari from the Sleeping Barrow King, or rescue Ari from the Sleeping Barrow King. And that's where you get the story of Caboth rescued princesses back from the Sleeping Barrow King.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's a good point. Devi certainly is hell-bent on getting into the library there. She's honestly one of my favorite characters. I know we don't get her as much as some of the other characters, but I love Devi as a
Oh
character
yeah.
so much.
Oh yeah. She of all the girls in the book, she's my favorite
Oh yeah.
favorite girl in the book by far.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love all the does a great job of making the characters extremely likable.
Yeah.
But yeah, Devi, I like that gangster personality that she has. She's great.
Yeah. She's so awesome. I wanted to ask you guys about yeah, I'm sure you guys read the third book prologue that he put out.
Yeah.
I don't think I caught your episode on that, because you guys did an episode on that or something, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What was your take?
Oh man, it's been a while.
With
well,
all the potions and stuff downstairs, everything was kind of a mess.
Yeah, so it gives some indication that Kavoth, there's more going on at the Waystone Inn than he's just chilling there and hiding. It seems like they're setting something up. He's there for a reason. There's something specific he's trying to accomplish by being there. It's not as simple as that he just went there and is just chilling there and waiting. It could be the case that Bast is the one in the basement doing those things. Like there's when Chronicler shows up and Bast is spying on him from the basement. It could be that Bast is the one that was down there doing those kind of things. But it seems like Kavoth has a plan, like with the sword hanging it on the wall and all the different clues, like the chimney. It seems like the Waystone Inn is built into a waystone. Like the chimney seems like a waystone. And so it seems like he's got some sort of plan. I don't know specifically what the plan would be, but it seems like there's something. Maybe he's like trying to lure Cinder or something to the Waystone Inn, and he's gonna kill him and sacrifice himself. Yeah. That's how he's waiting to die. He's waiting to kill Cinder and then be done.
Have you guys seen the theory from Captured in Words, where he talks about I forget what they are, but his video explains it all. There's a lot of parallels between the Waystone Inn and Elodin's chamber in the rookery. And so the theory is that the Waystone Inn keeps out like sympathy and all that kind of stuff. He made some connection to music too, something about how in Elodin's room, once the door closed, there was this kind of like,
weird resonance. Yeah.
And he likened it to something that was said about the Waystone Inn, and he was saying maybe that's why there's no music in the Waystone Inn, like no music is ever played there. I don't know. He had a bunch of connections, but I was just wondering if you guys had seen that.
It's we've talked about like maybe there's something about the Waystone Inn that mutes magic abilities. It seems weird that Kavoth would try, because he tries to set the Skin Dancer on fire with sympathy. It seems, and then it's not just there's some kind of magic is used early on when he breaks a bottle. Like Chronicler is pushing him to try to tell a story, and when he touches on Denna, Kavoth, a bottle breaks down, a few feet away from Kavoth. It just shatters.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And Kavoth, it specifically mentioned that Kavoth doesn't say anything, so that's not naming, that's not sympathy. Something else. That's some other type of magic that he used to shatter that bottle. And it's not explained what he did. Maybe it's shaping or something like that, but it seems like there's at least some sort of magic ability still left in the room. And then Chronicler uses naming. So naming is still possible. He creates a binding with iron against Bast. Bast uses magic in the Waystone Inn. He uses crazy magic, and he uses multiple different types of magic. He's got him walking around is magical because he's got hooven feet. He's a satyr, and he's got normal legs in the Waystone Inn. So if it's something that limits magic, it would be very specific. But also, Kavoth can't use his fighting skills, like when he tries to use the movements to fight the guys in the bar that are robbing him, he's not able to do it. He's like, he knows what he's supposed to do, but he's not able to actually do it effectively.
Yeah.
And so it seems like it's not, I don't think it's magic. I think it's Kavoth. And like, what I think is that when he fundamentally changed his name and he became Code, I think he changed his true name. And I think that the reason he can't do sympathy, or he can't play, he could still sing, but he can't play music, and he doesn't have the fighting skills, is that he has the memories of what he would need to do. He like mentally knows what words need to be said, and how to move. He knows what he's supposed to do, but he can't do it because he's lost like the muscle memory that was achieved when he was actually Kavoth. Kavoth learned how to do those things.
Right.
Kavoth put in all those hours. Kavoth strengthened his Alar. Coat didn't do any of those things. Coat didn't train with the ATEM. And so the reason he has the memories of Kavoth, but he doesn't have all the knowledge and achievement, that the practice that was earned by Kavoth. I think that's why he can't do those things. That to me makes more sense than it would have to be such a specific magic that is preventing him from using sympathy and fighting, but everybody else can use magic. And so it would just, and he uses magic in one instance, but he can't use it in another. So there's got to be something about Kavoth that's different.
What is the likelihood of so I feel like whenever Kingkiller gets mentioned, or whenever like the topic of the trope of an unreliable narrator gets mentioned, Kingkiller automatically gets brought up. It's kind of like set the standard. That and Dresden Files have kind of set the standard for like having like an unreliable narrator. What do you think the likelihood is that Quoth is lying about a large majority of his story or exaggerating it?
I think it's very low because it's a first person narrative. So in order to know that it was all a lie, Kavoth would have to just tell you like, I was just making all that up. All the stuff I told you in the first two books, meaninless. Doesn't matter.
But it was all a lie. It's all told through the frame narrative, though, which is third person, which is him relaying this story.
Yeah. But I mean, we just have that one source of information. Like, the problem when you go unreliable narrator, in order to find out that the person's unreliable, it's usually someone else has to inform you, or there's some great reveal that there like a Sozer Kaisei type of reveal. There's nothing like that with Kavoth. It would just be, I made it up. All that stuff I told you, and that meaningless, didn't matter. I just wasted your time. It would be like, a slap to your face. Like, why did I read your books then? Why was I going through all this stuff? Like, if you were just lying, how would I know what is true and what is not without Kavoth going through, this story was true, this was a lie, this was true, this was a lie, this is true. If he's just bullshitting and then it just ends and we don't know what was true and what was bullshit, then we don't have any reason to believe any of it. And then it's like, well, what's the point? And so I think when he says, like, he talks to Bast, and Bast is like, you could tell him whatever you want, but you'll tell me the truth. When he gets real mad when Kavoth tells him he met the thing.
Yeah.
And Kavoth's like, no, Bast, this is my opportunity to get the truth out. This is my chance to get the true story of my life out there. I want the true history written down. I think he's being genuine there. So like, if he's being unreliable, I would only think it's in the sense of he's giving his perspective on the events, and it might be different from someone else's perspective. They might interpret it differently, but I don't think he's lying. I definitely don't think he's lying about what happened.
Okay.
There are a number of times where he does a little bit of a stepping out, where we'll be reading, we're in character. He's obviously telling Chronicler the thing, but it'll be not in the Waystone Inn chapters, and he's telling a story, and then he'd say, I'd like to tell you that I did this, but I actually did this. You know what I'm saying? Like, so he kind of leads us in. Like, he'll end a chapter a couple of times where he does that. Usually something with Denna, I'd like to say that I did something charming, but instead, I sat there and sulked and fucking was all worried that she hates me or whatever. But there's a number of those, which that kind of hurts. I mean, in a way that hints at unreliable narrator, but it hurts the
It hints
theory.
at it. I think it does the opposite. It hints
No,
at telling
I
the
know.
truth. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it hints at the possibility while telling you this seems more truthful, that he's
Right.
willing to say, if I was going to tell a different story, I would say I'm Billy Badass here. Instead, I'm saying this is who I was. I was 15 or I don't know, 12, 13, whatever. So I think that lends further that he's more of a reliable narrator. It is funny to me, just the idea that at the end he's like, oh, by the way, this was all made up. So
Didn't
you can
happen.
tear that up. No,
They
this
did-
was all a
they-
dream.
Just like the
No,
what's that clip with the guy from Star Trek, number one, when he's like, didn't happen, no way, nope, wrong again. Like it was just a long string when he was on some show where it's a classic clip where it's just like him at the end of episodes. It was some like conspiracy show, and he's like, did you think that happened? Nope, didn't happen, false, we made it up, we tricked you. And it's just one clip after another. They stream together. It's a classic clip.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think it would be like a lot more subtle and kind of, it would be done in a different way than, oh, I was like making the whole thing up and then the book ends. I think it would be something where, another character maybe catches him in this lie or something like that. I think where most people get that is, he is Edema Rue. He is one of the best liars. He's one of the very best actors. He makes up stories for like a living, or at least that's like what his family does. Although, like they research their stories as well, like the Lon Ray thing.
But he's definitely in his story that he's telling, he lies constantly. But he tells us when he was lying and when he was telling the truth. I could see something where there was like a specific lie where like everything else was true, but this one point I tricked you on for a specific reason.
Right.
But if you just go like, you cast out on everything he said, and it's not just like one specific thing or two specific things, it breaks the story. It makes, because we're not going to learn then. How are we going to ever learn the truth of what actually happened? Because he'd have to write 3 more books to go backtrack and start over again and then tell us the truth. So it would have to be like something specific and not cast out on the entire scope of the story. Because the whole premise of the book is this is this historic figure, this notorious guy, and here's the truth about what really happened. That's the premise. That's what he sells the book on. And so you can't pull the rug out at that point.
There are a number of moments where he does say he's a tremendous liar, right? And does mention that. I do kind of like the idea that if it was a lie, he spun it, I'm the good guy. Instead, he ends up being the bad guy. He's the guy that wrecked the world, right?
I would be so mad though, just because then what was all the stuff I read? What really happened? That would be my next question. Be like, what really happened? Who knows? I think
that's why he's writing it. It's to anger you.
Yeah, that would be a very effective way. That'd be very effective.
It's just
I'd
to
be like,
lead
hey,
up to
if your
disappointment.
objective was to really piss me off, you did it. You nailed it, buddy.
Well, I love this idea, kind of bouncing off of that. I love this idea that I saw on Reddit a while back that this is probably a bad way to describe it, but that this is all one big like social experiment, because like Quoth talks about what's the story, the kid with the screw in his ass or whatever,
and the ass falls off,
and he says later, he's like, my dad used to tell me these stories and then never finish them because it was more interesting to speculate, and it was more interesting to kind of like sit there and try to figure it out and come up with all these solutions and all these reasons for why. And
so it's all
isn't that exactly?
Large part of what he did. Yeah.
So it could be all a lesson for Bast, right? Because
that's our entire podcast is that lesson, going through and speculating and picking apart all the different clues and trying to figure out answers through, because the way he tells his story is he doesn't give a lot of explicit information. Most of it is implied. And so it allows you to kind of speculate and to formulate your own ideas and try to figure things out on your own and make your own guesses. And that's why you got myriad different theories and pointing in all kinds of different directions. The hard part is trying to come up with theories that all coalesce together, that you don't have theories that contradict other theories, and like something where it all encompasses and it all fits together. Like that's the hard part, is
Right.
finding all these theories that align and match.
Yeah. It's hard to there's so many out there. It's hard to make them all kind of connect. I feel like we in the community usually have like a lot of good pieces, but like making those all fit together. And there are people on like Reddit and stuff where they've taken multiple theories and kind of connected them, and it's been like, wow. But yeah, it is kind of hard to take all these different pieces and turn them into.
That's kind of what we've done on our podcast. Is we basically I start off where I start going through theories slowly but surely, adding more and more and more and more. By the end of it, we have, I have theories on like exactly how I think things, could go. There's no way to know, like, okay, all the theories tell you this is what's going to happen. It's like, here's all these theories, and here's how you could make a coherent third story with all these theories, and how you could put them all together and where they would fit. And so that's kind of what we do on the podcast, is try to kind of connect all the dots.
Nice.
Slowly but surely builds up throughout the episodes.
That's a big part of the reason why the first 3 episodes are like the first 3 chapters, right? And that's why you can, we thought it became necessary. Like the idea is, let's just do 6 chapters. Well, the first chapter, you got to explain there's so much to explain in just the chapter with Chronicler, because this is all new. Right. What does all this mean? And, when we were first doing it, the thought was, well, we just go back chapter by chapter. You can't. You have to spoil. What else are we going to talk about here? Yeah. So talk about stuff at the end of the book and the first 2nd chapter, because it all connects.
Yeah. One of our other buddies that did the first book with us, before we were starting, he was like, shouldn't we just like do no spoilers? I'm like, there's no way. No, I'm talking about these books without spoilers. I was like, that would be the most boring thing in the world for me. Yeah. I was like, you don't understand. I was like, just go through both books, and then you'll understand when I start going through the theories on why you want to do a spoiler episode, a spoiler thing with these books. You could do like if you're doing, like, to me, like if you're doing no spoiler, then you just do like a 2-hour episode recapping the book and that kind of thing. You don't go chapter to chapter with this book. It's just the people who are really into these books, they're really into diving into the theories. And I think that's where you got to go if you're talking about the books.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine trying to do like your guys' podcast and not spoil like Wise Man's Fear or like anything past what you're talking about, because then you're just talking about the scene and there's nothing else to connect it to.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much relevance. I mean, and you miss all the Easter eggs and like, what does this tie to? Why is this foreshadowing this, and getting the relevance? I mean, it's a great tool. I mean, I wouldn't pick up all this stuff. I picked up hardly any of this stuff on my own. For sure. And by the way, it's still a great read. Yeah. Shit, man. The first time through, it's amazing. It's one of the most amazing books I had ever read without making all the connections. It's astounding what he was able to accomplish with all that.
Well, as we kind of probably start to wind down a little bit here, I want to go through, I want to circle back to my personal favorite theory. And it's one of those that I know has a lot of holes, and there's a lot of ways that you can kind of take it apart and whatnot. But I just like to believe in it because I think it would be so interesting. Is the Chandrian are not necessarily the bad guys, that the Amir, like the way we think of the Chandrian in the book is actually like the Amir, and the Amir are actually the Chandrian, or the Chandrian, or what do you guys think of that? Is there any world where the Chandrian could end up being maybe not necessarily the good guys, but not the bad guys we think they are?
I don't think there's a way you can make them not bad guys, considering, like, the only time we see them on screen is them tormenting Kavoth in such a vicious and cruel way. And like Haliax is like, you guys are getting too fond of your cruelties. And
So
you could say like, maybe they aren't the ones that killed all those people and everything. But best case scenario is they just showed up after a mass slaughter and then just like chilled, cooked a fire, and are just like chilling around a fire with a bunch of dead bodies. And then when a little kid comes up, they're like, look what happened to your parents. Where are your parents? Oh, you poor little kid. Oh, your parents are dead. Like, I mean, It's such a sadistic, I can't see that. But what I could see is that it's much more nuanced and they're much more gray than, it's not all black and white. I think there's reasons why Haliax is doing what he's doing. And I think the people he's using are almost certainly villains. I don't know about Haliax. I don't know, like he was, like the story said, he was accounted a good man. He was accounted as the best of them. So what cracked? What happened? Why is he the way he is? I think that is going to be a much more in-depth question than just he's bad and the Amir are good. I don't think the Amir are good. I think the Amir clearly are very gray characters. I think it's two gray groups fighting a war and innocent people are getting caught up in between them.
Well, so Haliax is almost certainly Lanray, right?
Oh yeah. He's 100% Lanray. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd have to go back through all these theories to make my argument well spoken, but Cinder, I've heard, is almost like a Horcrux of Lanray, that he's like this separate being, almost like a shadow person. Like he's not like this real thing, and he's all the sadistic and terrible parts of Lanray that he had to like separate from himself. And so I almost wonder if Cinder is like the sadistic one in the group that nobody can really control, and maybe there's a couple other Chandrian that, you know, they can't control very well, but they all have to stick together because they're all fighting for this one purpose, and that purpose would be to erase their name from everything. Maybe it's possible that they themselves can't die until everybody forgets about them, and so they're just trying to pass on to the next world, and they're trying to, you know, kill all these people along the way who are continuing to bring them up.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. Is they're trying to, names are obviously extremely important, and Celatos, he's like, you know, your name will curse you, and you know, something along those lines. I don't remember the exact words off the top of my head, but he tells him like your name will be a curse upon you. So I do think that there's a sense that Haliax, and even like in Scarpy's story, Haliax says it would be better for nothing to exist than for all these weeds. And so he's like, it's better to end it all than for there just to be a world full of weeds. And so I definitely think that there's a sense that he's just like this emu depressed guy that just wants to end the world. Yeah. But I think he probably has justifications. I think he's probably been screwed over and he's tormented and he's lost. He's very similar to Gavoth, I think, in Coat. And I think Kavoth's going to experience a similar thing to Lanray in losing Denna and Lanray losing Lyra. And I think that, you know, Kavoth, I think, just didn't completely break bad, whereas I think Haliax went into, I'll destroy it all rather than live with all this pain. And part of the problem is Haliax can't escape behind any of the doors. They talk about he can't escape behind madness. He can't escape behind forgetting. He can't escape behind sleep. He can't escape death. So any of the ways that you would escape painful memories, there's no option. He can't sleep. He can't forget. Imagine that if you lost the person you cared about more than anything in the world, and you could never forget it, could never let it go. You could never sleep. You couldn't kill yourself. You couldn't even go mad. It's just permanently embedded in your brain, and you're just constantly living with this torment forever. You would want to end the world. And I think that, you know, and I would understand why someone like that would want to end the world, even if I don't agree with them. I would understand their motivation. I think we will understand Haliax's motivation, but I don't think we'll agree with him or think he's like doing the right thing. I don't think that they made them too evil in the start. You can't have
Yeah.
someone dancing on the grave of a little kid's parents in front of him as it happens, and then spin them into being a good guy. You made them too evil, like at that point, and then it gets too cheap. It becomes like, yeah, I didn't see that coming because you made them so freaking evil. You made them the Joker, and then you're like, oh no, it turns out the Joker was Batman. It's like, no, Joker can't be Batman.
I think that is really key. I think the Amir and the Chandrian mirror one another in that they both see what they're doing as the just cause,
Yeah.
And but one, I mean, who knows? Perhaps one is more evil than the other. We're gonna find more out about the Amir doing dirty shit too, I'm sure. But yeah, I agree with Dan. We've definitely hashed that a lot where we talk about what the Chandri did early on. But I can also appreciate if Cinder's just that rogue agent, right? That they can't control. It's almost like a Loden couldn't be kept in a cage, right? Certain people can't be controlled, right? What do you do with them if you can't kill them? Well, put them on your team and try to rein them in to some degree. Seems like Haliak's got control over them, those to a certain degree. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that obviously isn't fully fleshed, but I think that what we're talking about in terms of more gray from each, it bodes to better writing.
Yeah,
right,
for sure.
But there is one caveat. One of the Chandrian is almost certainly a good guy, and Grey Dalsinti.
Oh.
Grey Dalsinti is clearly a good guy. We have a theory that Grey Dalsinti is basically a secret good guy, and he's gonna have a relationship with Kavoth where he's like the Lone Ranger, and Kavoth is gonna be his Tonto. And so we've hashed that out, and that's one of those hidden in the subtext. He's kind of like this Clint Eastwood, the man with no name, doesn't speak, just smokes a lot of cigs, glares at people. Because when they say about Grey Dalsinti, they say when they go all over the Chandrian and the different things about them, they say Grey Dalsinti who never speaks. He's the man who doesn't speak. So he's clearly going to be a Clint Eastwood figure in this world.
I like Guaranteed. How so the arc that we went through on this was we brought him up and we're like, that's the weakest thing ever. This guy doesn't do anything. And by the next episode, we made him the coolest character in the whole thing.
Yeah. Just started off with like, hold on, he doesn't speak. What does that even mean? Who cares? Like that's like, oh, Grey Dalsinti, that guy just stands over there and is real socially awkward. It's like that's a Chandrian member. Like they have a socially awkward Chandrian.
It's really fun though.
Eventually, he became a superhero figure in our story where he's Clint Eastwood. He's the man with no name.
He's great. He's just super cool, wears a duster, smokes cigs, and gives evil looks to people. But he's not really a good guy. You're implying that
he's 100% a good guy. He's definitely going to be the Lone Ranger.
He's the cool bad guy.
No, he's too cool to not be a good guy.
Pushing it to another level. All right.
So one of the last theories I definitely wanted to touch on, we talked about Coates' thrice locked chest. And we talked about how his name is probably inside. I want to talk about what you guys think is in the Lacklist box, because it's certainly something similar is certainly going on. But first, how do you think he will end up opening his thrice locked chest? Do you guys have any theories for that?
I don't know that he will. If I was writing the story, I would leave it as this is his great torment, that if he got into it, it would lead to disaster. And so he wants to get into it because he wants to save dinner or something along those lines. But if he does get into it, it's going to lead to disaster. So I would leave it as that he can't get into it. But who knows? If he can, who knows how he's going to get in? Like, I mean, I don't have a theory on how he would open it. Because of the way it's written, it seems impossible.
Yeah,
it would have to be. He'd have to reacquire his magical abilities or something along those lines. And so maybe there's a way. Maybe that's why he's at the Waystone Inn, and that's what he's waiting for, is his opportunity to get back in it. And then, he's got to do something. But I don't think it's his name that's locked in, because I don't think you could lock like a name in a box. That just seems too storybook. I think that's something you would hear in a story like that. Hespa tells, like, Ajax locked the name of the moon in a box. I don't think that's actually how names work. I don't think you could lock a name into a box. I think there's something to do with the stuff he's locked in the box. I think it could be that he needs it to regain his true name, or there's items in there that would allow him to get behind the doors of stone again, or something along those lines.
Okay.
I think that could be the case, but I don't think it's like his actual name is locked in. Because there's just nothing about the magic that would show that that's even a possibility, that you could just lock a name in a box. And then on the lackless box, I think it's likely something like on the 4-plate door, there's keys. Like, it seems like there's keyholes. Yeah. And I think it's likely what is needed to open the 4-plate door.
Have you guys heard people talking about how it's possibly a piece of the moon?
Yeah.
It's like it says in the text, I wish I could remember exactly what it said. It's been a while. But that doesn't it say it felt like a round object, or it felt like something?
Yeah, it's
small?
like something rolled around, like maybe a piece of glass or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard theories that it's like the stone that Celotos stabbed his eye with, and or like an actual piece of the moon is locked in there. And so it's tough to say. My best guess would be that because there's clearly something like Yillish knots is part of the equation on opening that box. I think he's going to have to learn Yillish knots, learn the same magic Denna learns. And I think that might be why Denna was at Severin with Master Ash. And it was right after he took her to Yill to learn Yillish knots. And then when she gets Severin, she's learned Yillish knots and she's tying braids in her hair. And I think it could be that she was brought there to maybe get inside that box, that Master Ash brought her there. And there's like behind the scenes, maybe she got into the box or something like that.
Okay.
And so it could be a case, maybe she opened it and took whatever was in it and left something else inside of it. Something like that could happen. It's pure speculation. I don't have theories to back it up where that's exact, but something like that could happen. But I think Yillish knots, that written magic, I think there's something to do with that's how to open that box. Maybe similar with Kavos Singh. There's something to do with like the written magic to open his box. Things along those lines. But I think it's likely that the lackless, it's either that opening the lackless little box is needed to get behind the 4-plate door, or to get open the doors of stone and release Ajax. I think that's my best guess on what is going to be used for.
Dang. And you talked about sorry, just to kind of jump off that last thing you just said, you talked about the Barrow King being in there. You used a certain name for him. I forget.
King Phasia.
Do you think that is Jax?
No, King Phasia is a different guy. King Phasia was the first king of Vent. So Roderick is the current king of Vent, and he's Roderick Calanthus. Phasia is Phasia Calanthus. So he's like the elder of that line. He was the first one that united the kingdoms of Vent, and he brought all these warring tribes together, and he built them into one kingdom. And that's where Vent comes from. And that's where like King Roderick Calanthus is the lineage of King Phasia. Yeah. And so I think he's probably, I don't know exactly what's going on with him, but he's Rothfuss has described him as watching over Vent, and he's watching over the lands. And so I think that he's definitely not Ajax, but he could be someone that was like, in order to protect the world, I'm going to go and become a Draug, and I'm going to guard Feyreanial or something like that. And I'm going to guard the doors of stone or something like that. Or it could just be a complete villain and a bad guy and, some psycho. Who knows what he's going to be, but he's definitely going to play a role. He's 100% going to play a role in book 3.
Okay, cool.
I was thinking in terms of the thrice locked box, it seems to me, I don't know, kind of logical. His maybe the cloak, his rings, those could be in there. Seemed it's like his version of Taberlin's, staff and candle and all that stuff.
Right.
His loot, maybe he gets Ilian's loot. And that's locked in there. Like he's got maybe he's got a magical loot now. So things like that could be locked in that box.
Yeah, we need some music in book 3. Shit, man. Like I like this whole time, like it's you forget. Well, forget. We talk about it, how it's not in the Aeolian, but his writing of music is so good. Like some of those chapters, like the chapters where he just plays music that it's not a song. He just made, wind spinning a leaf, shit like that. It's so amazing. There's a lot of poetic abilities like wrapped up in that.
Imagine having to live up to, you wrote the Lay of Sir Sabian in that song at the Aeolian, and then he follows that up with the time where he's in the Aeolian and he sings, he plays the real hard song and he makes it look real easy. That. And then, he does that. Like, that's how he followed up and that was his big one in the second book. Like those are 2 phenomenal chapters where you're just like reading that and you get absorbed into music you can't hear.
Yeah.
And then he's got to follow that up. He's got to do something in the third book with music. And it's like, man, you just set yourself up with a hard axe to follow.
Yeah. That's true. All right. So one of the last ones I have here is, how do you guys think characters like, like these larger than life characters like Taberlin or Telu, how would you think they would tie into everything in the end? And do you think that Quoth has any like relation with Taberlin? Is there any sort of connection there?
I don't know about Taberlin. Taberlin could be a figure that's still in the world today. Like maybe he is like a Telu or something like that. But I think Kavoth's lineage more than likely goes back to Ajax. I think Ajax is probably the first Lackless. Like they describe Jax as a luckless guy, and I'll talk about like he'd get a new shirt and he'd tear a hole in it. Very similar, like all the descriptions of Ajax are very, very in line with Kavoth. And he stole, he put the name of the moon in a box, and then you got the Lackless box, and that's part of their heritage.
Right.
And so I think it's likely that Ajax is the OG Lackless, and so I think Kavoth is probably a descendant of Ajax, and it could be that Lanre and Lyra, because they in the song or in the poems that they have about the Lackless families, they talk about like the wife, the Lackless wife, she's got her husband's rocks locked in a box and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Well, there's only one Lackless, one group that goes back to the creation war that is like husband and wife, and that's Lanre and Lyra. And so if they're the Lackless they're talking about in that poem, it could be that Ajax and Haliax, which Haliax means breath of Ajax. Hal in Latin means breath. So Haliax is breath of Ajax. And it could be that Lanre is Haliax's son. And so that it could be that Kavoth is a descendant of Ajax and Haliax, or Ajax and Lanre or Lyra. And so I think his lineage probably traces back to some of the most powerful people in the world, which would also explain why he's so gifted, why he's abnormally gifted, where like Kilvin's like, I don't even know how you possibly drew so much power in these situations. Like it's flabbergasting one of the most powerful people on the planet.
Yeah.
And so I think that's likely that his heritage goes back towards them. Taberlin could be like a Telu figure. And I definitely think the angels are playing a role, because I think the angels, when the Chandrian dipped out before they murdered Kavoth, when Haliax like put this kid out of his misery basically, and then he was like, they come and they dipped out. if it was a mirror, you would expect like some guys charging in on horses or something coming in, like actual beings that you can see. The angels are described as like they left this plane. They're you can't see them. They describe them as the only way you can see them is through great peril, and you have to have great power, and through great pain is the only way you could see one. And so I could see it a situation where the angels saved him, and then he had the dream, and the angels put the dreams in his head about the how to survive in the woods and the circle of gray stones and the knots that Abinthy was teaching. And then there's also the time where Kavoth is dying in the snowdrift in Tarbean, and he says he saw like some vision, and it was like a fiery, basically almost like a fiery eagle type of description, where it seemed like a description of the angels that was described in Scarpy's story. So it seems like the angels sent the guy dressed up as Incanus to save him in that situation, and then they gives him a silver talent, and it's just extremely lucky. And Kavoth was about to die in that situation. So like in his most perilous moment, he sees a vision that seems like an angel. So it definitely seems like the angels got their hand on his shoulder, and so that they're playing a role. And so it could, and there's also the story that he killed an angel.
Right. Yeah. Do you think it's Willem or Sim? I've heard people make that argument.
No, I don't think Sim is an angel. Because the way they describe them, it sounds like not normal people wouldn't just be able to see angels just walking around. It seems like the only way to see one is through great power and through great pain. And so I don't see angels just like kind of walking around everyday people.
No. Do you think it's a literal angel?
Oh, I could definitely see a situation where if he kills someone who they describe as an angel, maybe like an Ari or something like that too. So, so like I could see a situation where the stories have gotten passed down where like a Sim or an Ari or someone is eventually described as an angel, similar to like old Cobb telling stories about him killing a demon and stuff. And when all he did was call the name of the wind.
Yeah.
I do feel like for some reason I have this feeling Sim is going to die.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for
sure. I think he's a goner.
It's just anybody that reads, I guess that's where it comes from. If you read enough books, and he's so endearing in so many ways, it just it feels natural.
There's got to be something horrific. Some horrific shit has to happen for him to end up where he ends up. So I think a lot of people are going to die.
Yeah.
And why is Willem not around? Like you would think like something where Kavoth is at fault for Sim's death. I don't necessarily know he would kill him, but a situation where Sim died, maybe Ambrose kills Simon to get at Kavoth, and then Will just like, I'm out and I'm done, and dips out. And so Kavoth's all on his own now because of, they either died or they're gone.
Yeah.
Although somehow he got hooked up with Bast, but in that storyline.
Yeah,
sorry. I was going to say, in terms of the lineage, I do have this feeling. I don't really have anything to back it up, but I do have this feeling that Dinah has some lineage that connects back with importance. For sure, Kavoth has to. I mean, with the abilities he has, he has to. But I get that feeling with Dinah because they parallel in so many ways.
Yeah.
But we just know so little about her while knowing so much. It's so interesting.
Could be like a Lannister thing where like Kavoth is the lineage of Lanre, and then she's the lineage of Lyra's family.
So they're
actually going to be related. They're gonna go.
Nice.
He's like, you know what? Like the Game of Thrones really had it right with the incest route. I'm definitely I want to go that route.
Right.
Well, they're going to House of Dragon because they haven't hooked up. So
yeah.
I think by the end of the story, a lot of people are going to wind up dead, and Quoth. I mean, he's got to go into the, like you said, he meets Bass, so he's got to go into the Fae again. And I haven't really heard this theorized about too much. It's just something that has always kind of been at the back of my mind. So we know that Quoth has to go into the Fae or something to meet Bast, right?
Yeah.
what if, now we know that time is weird in the Fae. What if he goes into the Fae realm and he comes back out and it's been, years and years and years, like generations or whatever.
Could be, yeah.
And, for some reason, Quoth is able to survive that, whether he's whatever the word you used for immortal earlier.
It couldn't be generations because he knows who the penitent king is, and he knows the figures in the Civil War.
Yeah.
So and the penitent king is almost surely Mayor Alvaron. Like the soldiers that beat him up are wearing his colors, and so it's almost surely that. And I think what happens is that Mayor Alvaron, maybe he sends Kavoth to kill Roderick. Maybe there's some reason, or like he sends Kavoth to meet with Roderick, and then he has Dagon kill Roderick, and Kavoth is blamed for it or something along those lines. But Kavoth also says, I earned all my names, and so he earned the name of Kingkiller. So but who knows what that means,
right?
So maybe he earned it because he was an idiot or something like that,
right?
But
good point.
I think the reason he's probably penitent king is in this Civil War, for him to become the king again, or to bring his family back into being a kingship, is that he joined forces with the Talons, and so he's penitent, and like he needed the added muscle and the added weight to his kingdom, and so he joins forces with the Talons, and that's where you get the penitent aspect of it.
Nice. Yeah, I remember you had made a tweet about the colors, and at that time I was doing a read through, and I was like, oh my God, he's right. That's crazy. Like Alvaron is the king right now. That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, he's at least one of them. And then who the other one is, who knows? Could be, I would be surprised if it was Ambrose, but I could see it being his dad. I think Ambrose is got to go. You gotta axe that dude. Like, it's gonna be so disappointing if Ambrose comes out unscathed and he's just chilling as king. Like, that can't happen.
Die. He's got to
be the guy that Kavoth kills.
Yeah.
At the where the cobblestones are broken. Like, who else would he have other than Cinder? Who else would he have so much animosity to kill? But it seems like the person he killed is a known figure, and Cinder would not be a known.
Right. All right. Well, we are going to go into our final thoughts. We're going to get out of here pretty soon. I do have kind of two questions that encapsulate this little final segment. They may sound big, but think of them in like a simpler way. The first question is, how would you land the ship regarding this series, or or land the plane, or how do you expect Rothfuss to kind of land the plane with this series? And I don't mean like what do you think is going to happen in the third book, but like that final chapter or two, like where do you think we will find Quoth at the end here? Is he going to be, like, people have talked about him being like exiled, or kind of just like everything falls apart even worse and he just continues living out this hermit life? Or, Rothfuss has even talked about doing future books. I don't necessarily know if he's referencing books about Quoth or what, but there is the possibility that Quoth gets his name back and everything and goes on to be the next Taborlin, and then we get more books about that someday, maybe. I
could see it go. If I was Rothfuss, Kavoth would die at the end. I would end it and Kavoth and be done with that story. And like when he talks about future stories, I think you could tell so many stories within the time frame here that haven't been told.
Yeah,
like you have unlimited space to do that. Like, I mean, he passes over large pieces of history. So like in like his trip to Mayor Alvaron's court, like what happened with the pirate ship, the pirates invaded his ship, things like that. You could tell those stories.
Right.
But the way I would end it is that Kavoth draws in Cinder, that the reason he's at the Waystone and the reason he keeps saying Cinder's name. He keeps saying Ferula. He says Cinder's true name multiple times.
Yeah.
I think that he draws in Cinder and he kills Cinder with the sword, but he also dies in the process. But that was like his final, like he finishes the story, you find out like he screwed everything up, and this is his last act to just end this one piece of crap person. And I'm going to rid the world of this guy who's causing all this chaos in the world, who's pushing civil war and pushing, killing people. I'm going to end him, but then I'm done and I'm not going to do any more damage on the world. And it's a tragedy, but there is a heroic aspect to his end, that he didn't just die, crying like a little kid and just being a baby. I screwed up. Like, because otherwise, why are you hiding? If you screwed it all up, go fix your freaking problem. If he's not trying to fix his problem, then it's going to be a little disappointing. So it's got to be like, there's got to be some reason he's there and he's got to do something. But also, I would kill him and make it a tragic ending like he's set up. Yeah. I wouldn't back off of that. I would make it a tragedy.
Yeah. So I like that better. But what I was thinking is what you'd said a moment ago, that the reason why he's sitting there and he can't go out and fix anything is to make the problem worse.
Yeah.
And that's what the prologues feel like. It feels like he's waiting to die, because if he does something, it makes it worse, right? There's going to be unleash more death on the world, more suffering, more scrael, more whatever, but yes, people have to be sacrificed, clearly.
Yeah. And that would be part of my ending, is that he doesn't get into the box. And that's why, is because to get into the box is to ruin the world. Like, and you find that's the tragic aspect of it, is like, he's not going to get in the box and then go fix everything, because if he got in the box and tried to fix everything, he would make problems worse. So instead of doing that, he does the heroic thing and sacrifices himself and eliminates the possibility of that he can even, screw up the world any further, by opening the box and then going and doing whatever, he would end up doing afterwards.
Right. Wow. That's really good. That's better than anything that I had thought of. What do you think? You mentioned the sword. You mentioned that he would kill Cinder with the sword that's on his back wall. Do you guys have any thoughts on what that sword is?
No, it's got to be some kind of magical sword. It seems similar in the way Cinder's sword is described and the Adim swords are described, and there's something special about it, obviously. So maybe it's like King Phaesia's sword or something like that. Like he steals it from King Phaesia. Like in the coin, there's a coin that they sell, Rothfuss sells, like on his website, of the Ventus coin, and it's got King Phaesia on it, and it's on one of the pictures he's holding a sword. And so maybe it's the sword that King Phaesia has. Maybe he has some kind of magical sword, and that is how he's able to kill an unkillable, immortal being.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Or he gets it from an angel or something like that too. Could be something like that.
The way it's described is similar to the Adim swords. The fact that he has the word folly sounds like it's connected to something he should not have done. Yeah. And he keeps it there as that reminder because he's emo coat,
Yeah.
But it's also that ultimate weapon, perhaps, which I like that. I like that spin that basically he ends up killing Cinder or someone with the sword, and it's all over, instead of him just sitting there suffering, waiting to die.
Yeah.
Cut flower, right?
Cut flower. Yeah. I love that description though. Like it's because it's like nobody knows what that means, but we instantly feel something. It was a cut flower sound of a man waiting to die, and it's just like, man, like I don't know what that word means or if it means anything, but it's so like evocative of like a certain like emotion or feeling.
He's got a way with words, man. He's a brilliant writer.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
it's very impactful.
Yeah. My very last question as we get out of here is I wrote down 3, but you guys can come up with however many you want. if you could have 3 mysteries from the Kingkiller Chronicles answered right now, what would they be? Or answered in the 3rd book or whatever, what would they be? If you knew for sure that 3 of them would get answered.
I wouldn't go with anything that I thought would spoil the book for me. So it would be like, what are the Tinkers part of the Fae court? Are they part of the Ruach? Where do the Adim come from? And also I would want to know where the Adim swords came from.
Okay.
I would want to know those 3 things, because I don't think those things would spoil what's going to happen in book 3, but they would give me information on some of these side characters that I have a lot of questions about, because they're extremely interesting cultures and characters that we don't know enough about, and I would like to know more about them.
If book 3, if like you're reading book 3 and book 3 is only answering 3 mysteries from the Kingkiller Chronicles, what like final?
Oh, well, then I want to know who Dennis Patron is, what her motivations are, and who the king, what king or kings he kills.
Okay.
Yeah.
What Dan really wants to know is why you can't pants people in the world.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions on magic, on how magic could work.
Yeah.
Because they describe magic and you can use sympathy to make things way more. So I'm like, why wouldn't you, like when Ambrose is walking down the street, you see him with his pants on, why wouldn't you link like a piece of cloth to his pants and like, into the tree, and then make his pants heavier than a tree. And so they immediately fall down around his ankles and just embarrass the shit out of him with pranks like that.
I feel like Quoth is like, after his first time at the Horns, he's really, really careful about malfeasance though. Like he's not going to try to do it in any situation where he doesn't absolutely have to, or like if he thinks he'll get caught. But
there's gotta be, there should be massive pranks going on with the magic that they have. They should be pranking the shit out of people with that
for
magic.
sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, but that also leads to the question that we brought up from early on, when he's first when Abinthy stops teaching him, he almost kills himself, right? When he links the air to his lungs, and the whole thing is like, well, he couldn't stop, right? He couldn't see.
That is one of the biggest plot hole in the book. When he links the air outside to the air in his lungs, and like, Abinthy's like, oh, you could have killed yourself. It's like, well, one, the way to immediately eliminate that link is to just let go of your alar. That would immediately end the link, and you should be able to breathe fine, no problems whatsoever.
But he's
worst case scenario should be that if he doesn't let go of the link, he's going to eventually pass out because he's not able to breathe in oxygen. And once he passes out, he will let go of his alar because it's not conscious anymore to hold the alar. So that should have broken the link. So
that's fair.
The worst case scenario in that situation should have been he passed out. That should have been as dangerous as it's been. But they made it seem, he wrote it in a way where it's like Kavoth could have killed himself. And it's like, no, that is not the case based on the magic system you've described. That's a hole in the book.
That's fair. Yeah. That scene though, I just want to say real quick, that exact scene is the thing that sold me on the entire series.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Dude, I was at Barnes and Noble, and I found like this book called the Kingkiller Chronicles. I was like, what's this? And I just opened it up to a random page, and I just read that scene, and I was like, oh my God, I have to read this. But,
oh yeah, it's great. Especially the first time you're going through it. You wouldn't even know enough about the magic system to spot the hole. And I would if I was able to ask Rothfuss about the books, that would be one of the things I would want to have an explain what his answer would be on explaining that situation. Like, why wouldn't Abinthy just be like, dude, why didn't you just let go of your alar? What were you thinking?
Yeah. But also he was like 8 in that scene. So I don't know if he would know how to let go of his alar.
Well, he did, because you have to, in order to break a link, you have to let go of your alar. The way to break a link is to stop believing it. So like, if you believe that these two items are linked together, the way to break the link is to stop believing that. Right. And then as soon as you let go of the belief, it ends immediately. And he's made that clear multiple times, like explicitly said that
It's like
multiple
in the
times
first-
throughout the book.
One of the first lessons.
I guess my argument would be like, if you're whatever he was, 8 or 9 or whatever, and you're freaking out because like you can't breathe in that situation at that age, are you really gonna like go through the mental motions?
I can come up with reasons why Kavoth would have panicked and held on to the belief and like a clinch type of thing.
Sure.
But the Abenthy's reaction doesn't make any sense, because it should have just been like, hey, just let go, just calm down, let go of your belief and you'll be fine. Let go. Like that, it shouldn't have been this panic, throw him out and like call the name of the wind, and should have just been like, dude, just let go, calm down.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim, I've been talking over you multiple times.
No. I mean, well, it's similar. Like so again, it doesn't really, he could do a similar thing with the Dracus and the scale, because he has the scale. And why can't he do negative weight, basically? Is like use the weight negatively and kind of crush it of its own weight.
Oh yeah.
So it's it's kind of the magic questions about how the magic system works.
Or like link the air inside the Dracus's lung to the air outside and suffocate it.
Yeah, do the same thing.
Yeah.
So like I would have a lot of questions on the magic system, because I start like, when you start explaining the rules to me, then I start thinking like, well, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do this? And so like I think you could come up with answers to them, but I would like to, those are some of the things too that I would like answers in book 3, is more information on how the magic system works.
That's fair. What about you, Tim? 3 things either that you could get answered now or from book 3 or whatever.
I mean, I do want to know. I'm very intrigued by what's in the box.
What's in the box?
Yeah, exactly. I am intrigued by that. Every time I revisit it, there's something more to Abenthy than we get.
Oh yeah.
The fact that he leaves when he leaves. It's very interesting in terms of the timing and kind of the situational circumstance of what happens when that happens. But I mean, because my main ones are what Dan had mentioned, Master Ash, especially. Who's the king he kills? That's a big one. But yeah, I mean,
why is Abenthy broke traveling the lands with all that power?
Yeah.
What are you doing, man? Why didn't you just set up a brewery somewhere? Why are you broke going to a town that doesn't know anything about, who would think you're like a demon for using magic? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why is he there?
There's so many things like that. There's many things like that where kind of the resolution that I was coming to is like, there seems to be this fatefulness that's pulling him, right? That's pulling him towards some direction. Is it the Aemir? Is it the Chandrian? Which side is it? That's kind of the bigger overall picture that I find really, really interesting, because that's one of the themes that he seems to play on, which is funny because I heard Rothfuss say once, he's like, I don't know what a theme is. Like he just threw his hands up to the question. It's like he was like, yeah, I don't do themes. It's like, well, of course you do.
Yeah,
there's
you
things
do.
all through the book. Every author does. What are you talking about? But I like that he said that. He's just like, yeah, I don't do themes. But, I mean, other than that, I mean, there's a lot more I want to know about Denna, but that's all going to come. I'm sure. I want to know a lot more about Ari, but. Yeah, kind of the magic things. Those are big questions, but the biggest ones, are the Master Ash, for sure, and the other one that I forgot already. What's in the box?
How cool Grey Dalcynti is, really.
Yeah.
What does
his voice really sound like?
Yeah.
What's his coolness level? How do you gauge that?
Yeah, well, I want that answer. There's a magic system for coolness in their world. And he's got to spell that out.
It's a meter that you get from Home Depot.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Abenthy. I'm curious. I'm wondering if he'll show up in the 3rd book, or if he's just kind of a character that kind of gets written off. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
I think so. My 3 would be the thrice locked chest, as well as like kind of just what the Waystone is, and just that whole like kind of frame narrative idea of like what exactly is happening. And of course that'll get explained in the 3rd book, I'm sure. But the other one, God, that I was just thinking of. Oh, of course, what's behind the 4-plate door. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's kind of all but confirmed at this point that it's got to be some kind of Barrow King, like you were saying. But I'm really interested to like just find out like what the whole significance of all of that is, as well as just kind of like the mystery behind the Chandrian. But now I'm also super interested in how much Jack in the Box pays in the Fey world, because it's I mean, it's got to be some archaic amount of money that they're paying Denna out there. So
it's significant, but it only spends in the Fae. That's why she's always she doesn't have a lot of money outside of there, but she's loaded when she goes into the Fae. Dude, she's one of the richest people in the Fae. She's working so many shifts. She's working double after double.
I also feel like this is more of a passion project for her. She's just really dedicated to the franchise. Yeah,
we eventually said she's got 5 franchises, but they're all right next to each other. She's not all that savvy business wise. She just all of them are right next to each other.
What was it? The idea? One's hamburgers, one's fries, or some stupid.
We said like one got real busy, and so then she just opened up one right next door, and then just kept going.
So ridiculous. One is going out of business because it's like right on the other side of the Cathay,
and rivaling each other. Her own businesses are competing against each other, talking shit like, that's got food poisoning.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good point. I want to know a lot more about the Cathay. I find the Cathay such an interesting narrative tool to put in a story. I mean, it's so interesting to insert. Man. There's a lot more about the Amir or the Adem that I would like to know about their mythology, what's really going on in their world, because it's very, very different. The tree and everything else is very different. You brought up the Waystones, though. I do want to see that clearer in terms of how that all sort of interconnects.
Yeah,
because it does seem like it's a portal, it's a passageway of sorts into the Fae. Obviously, that seems fairly obvious. But then some of the biggest events of his life, they're at Waystones. You know, they're sort of marked at Waystones when these things happen. So there's definitely a lot going on with Waystones. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's not going to be crystal clear pointed out what that is. They're just markers, but there's clearly something going on there.
Yeah, I think in the third book we'll get answers, but a lot of it will be like what we already have. Like the answers are sort of there. It's just up to us to figure it out. So I think like technically in the third book we will have all these answers, but we're gonna have to do a lot of kind of digging and stuff like that to really.
I hope so. I hope it's something that it's gives you reasons to reread the finished product.
Yeah, that is a great place to leave this out on. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for this long and going over one of the best fantasy series of all time. I'm sure you guys have an episode coming up soon. What can people look forward to on your next episode? Where are you guys at in the book?
Yeah, thanks for having us on. It was fun. We're towards the end of his time with the Adem. So that will be the next episode will be towards the end of that. Like he's getting ready to hook up with Pentha is where we're at. That's the chapter we're on. And
nice.
And we did a live stream earlier. So we'll drop that on the podcast too. So we got a couple episodes coming up.
Sweet.
It was fun. I like these types of dialogues. It's great. I love talking about, the books. These books are awesome. So yes, it was good.
Thank you guys so much for coming on. You guys are so knowledgeable about this, and I really learned a lot from this, and you guys are just a ton of fun. So thank you for hanging out.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
For sure. All right, guys, we are going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Be sure to check out the Kingkiller podcast. I'll have all their stuff linked below in the description. They are a ton of fun to listen to. If you're a Kingkiller fan, you definitely don't want to miss their episodes. As always, it helps the channel a ton when you like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that damn little bell icon to get notified when we put up new content. Definitely follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy for book recommendations and the occasional drunk tweet where I make an ass out of myself and then delete it in the morning. Upcoming episodes Upcoming episodes are a conversation with Nicholas Eames, the author of Kings of the Wild, and one of our most anticipated interviews with Kel Cade, author of King's Dark Tidings. You do not want to miss either of these episodes. They're going to be super awesome. We're also in talks with Mike from Mike's Book Reviews for an episode, so we'll keep you updated on that so you guys can submit questions and whatnot for him. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, what's in your thrice locked chest?